Vehicle pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger, roll with Planet.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Sliding down, try SC off. Say again, SC off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
Well, hello everyone. For the sake of everyone who is a subscriber to the NASASpaceflight YouTube channel, I hope you all have either multiple monitors or enough monitor to split screen or something, because boy is it a busy day today. My name is Thomas Burkhart, News Director for NASASpaceflight, and my name just showed up on the other stream that we're doing. This is hilarious. We've got two streams going right now. You may have already been tuned into an SLS booster test out there in Utah, I can't even speak. In Utah, there is also a Starship out in Starbase. Obviously, it's been there for a little bit, and SpaceX is getting ready to test that again. You can see the tank farm has become active, and the recondenser is active as well. So, signs for some more Ship 24 engine testing today. So, stream number 2, here we go. We got to be passing some records for how many times we've been live simultaneously here at NASA Spaceflight. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you can all keep tabs on everything that's happening today. I'm not alone on comms. I'm also joined by Alex here in the studio. Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Many live streams today, I guess. Falcon 9, Scrub, then SRB test, and here again for Ship 24. There we go.
There is definitely enough to keep us busy these days. If you started your day with NASA Spaceflight, you saw a Falcon 9 Scrub out at Vandenberg. Was supposed to launch a batch of Starlink satellites, but an abort in the last few seconds of the countdown. Still no word on what exactly caused that, but I guess they're going to try again tomorrow. Also, we are live from Utah.
Is active, I think, which I hadn't seen it a few minutes ago.
Yeah, the recondenser went active a little bit. So here on the Starship stream, obviously we're looking towards the left-hand side of the screen. You can see some vapors from the tank farm, and that stream of vapors from behind those 3 smaller dark tanks is the recondenser being active, the methane recondenser. So these are all signs that SpaceX is getting ready to conduct propellant loading onto Ship 24. Of course, we've seen them do this a couple times now. Ship 24 has done 3 total spin prime tests now, right, Alex?
Yeah, they did one. I think it was on Monday, and then another one. Another 2 yesterday.
Right, and 2 yesterday. So we're up to 3 completed spin prime tests, and well, today here's the deal. Same kind of deal as yesterday. There's still not been any sort of overpressure notification sent out to the residents of Boca Chica, and so in theory that means they are limited to doing more spin prime tests. However, it has been a very long time since we've gotten static fire testing or testing that traditionally came with the overpressure notices. So we don't want to say definitively that nothing has changed since then, basically. But regardless, we would expect some sort of engine testing with Ship 24, and that's what we're going to be live for here. Also, I believe we just had someone else joining our commentary team for today. Nick, are you on comms with us right now?
I am for now. We'll see how the commentary holds up here out in the field. But yeah, we have another test. Yippee skippy.
All right, I was going to say you must be out there in the field in Starbase. Nick is of course one of the photographers out there every day documenting everything SpaceX does out there. So Nick, what are you looking at? What are you looking for today?
Well, I'm looking for some kind of test, probably with Ship 24 since we have the orbital tank farm alive and well. Looks like since we've done our igniter tests and whatnot, we might be getting some flamies today, but still no overpressure notice from Mary. We're still waiting for that. And you asked what I'm looking at right now. I'm looking at Starbase Live. We've got that pulled up on the TV because we wouldn't want to miss out on anything.
Exactly. So and also I guess worth keep mentioning they're also testing B7.1 again. So that's the split screen there. SpaceX is doing many things at a time today, but we'll keep tabs on all of it and keep you updated best we can. I guess that SLS booster test is still in a hold, so we're gonna see how SpaceX progresses with their Starship testing. It's going to be a busy day, but it's all very exciting stuff. Anyway, as always, we will be taking your questions as well. So if you've got any questions about what you're looking at, tag us at NASASpaceflight in chat, and I'll try to pull those out best I can as well. All right. Well, Astro Guy asked if that test tank is venting. Well, yes, it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick. That B7.1 tank has been being tested for a little bit now, right?
Yeah, it looks like it. B7.1 got a little frosty earlier today, right after the road closure, and we were a little worried that that was going to be the only test today, because as much as we love 7.1, Ship 24 is slightly more exciting. So yeah, I'm sorry, bleh. Was it B7.1 booster 7.1 test tank?
Yeah.
Was getting its can crusher test. Looks like we had a depressed vent of some sort, and it's a little less venty at top, so. Maybe it was completed successfully. We'll have yet to see.
Gotcha. We'll keep an eye on that. Of course, we're going to be looking for Ship 24 to start getting frosty, because that'll be signs that we're getting close to whatever engine test SpaceX is planned for today. Really quick, Jarmo with a new PadRat membership. So Jarmo, thank you so much for your support. Greatly appreciated. Everyday Space Nerd has a question. When could we see the first booster static fire? Alex, all you have fun with this one.
Oh boy, that's the worst person that you could ask something like that. Because I don't usually go in these things. But okay, let's bet. I'm gonna say November 1st at 12 p.m. Nah.
That's very specific.
No, I'm gonna say. I don't think it's going to be. Well, hold on. I could see a static fire of the booster with just like very minimal amount of engines by probably the end of August if they bring booster 7 back to the orbital launch mount, and just don't scrap it or anything, or just move. Like if they were to move to booster 8, they need to do a lot of other testing, cryo tests and things like that, so I wouldn't see any of that until at least October. Now for the 33 engine static fire test, which is like the big item that we're looking for, I think that's actually gonna take a little more while, even with booster 7. That's probably gonna be something like September, October, because it's like a risky thing, a lot of fire, a lot of thrust, and they're gonna need to cover things at the orbital launch mount and retire all of the other stuff. So yeah, that's my guess. Let's put it that way. End of August for minimal engine static fire test if they keep booster 7.
Seems pretty likely there. It's good to see them taking their time, and hopefully they can get it right.
Yeah, I think next, like, I'll agree with Alex that the very first static fire of, well, all right, actually technically we've already seen the first booster static fire because booster 3 did a 3-engine static fire. I'm assuming you mean the next one. In that case, yeah, I'll concur with Alex and Nick. Next month or so would be a good timeline for that, but that would be the beginning of them working up to all 33 engines at once. So that would be later in the year. And of course, it all kind of assumes that they'll repair booster 7 in a reasonable time frame and get that back out to the pad. NASA Spaceflight fan wants to know, do we know if SpaceX would test 2 vehicles at the same time? I don't believe this is the first time they've ever done 2 different tests simultaneously at Starbase, right?
I think there was probably one other time where we saw 2 things being tested at the same time, but I cannot remember now. I
can't
do
remember.
have these. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Well, I can't remember a specific test combination, but I know we have seen a ship and then test tanks tested at the same time, and I think even fairly recently they've done that with perhaps the B7 test tank, not 7.1. But yeah, typically they don't test a ship and a booster at the same time. They'll typically do one or the other, but we have seen them do the smaller test tanks in concurrent with a different test.
So what are the different vehicles hooked up to? Obviously, there's the suborbital tank farm, which is hooked up to suborbital pads A and B, and Starship is on pad A right now, right?
No, it's in pad B.
Nope, I had a 50-50 chance and I blew it. So it's hooked up to pad B, but obviously that's hooked up to its own suborbital tank farm.
I can see vapors on the now that you say, I can see vapors on the umbilical to ship 24.
Oh
So
boy.
they're
Is that-
undergoing loading. It
Michael,
seems.
enhance.
Yeah,
we're
we need
gonna
enhance.
we'll get a view of the test stand, but that is another sign that they're getting closer to propellant loading. So propellant has reached to the test stand, and then we're gonna wait for that frost line or yesterday we saw those engine chill vents right around the same time that the frost line appeared, so maybe something like that. But once the vehicle itself is reacting too, we know propellant load is firmly underway. Actually, oh no, I'm looking at the way they secure the flaps to the ship. I thought those were frost lines, but those are just the cables or whatever.
Yeah, I'm
Easy
also trying
mistake.
to look for some of the early evidence of like that frost is gonna come. Is the
Right,
tank
yeah, where it just
gets
gets like darker, yeah.
colder? Yeah, and you see it become darker as water vapor just condenses into the tank. So that's sort of one of the things that preludes the appearance of frost. Okay, well.
Yeah, so that's that. But the ship is hooked up to that suborbital tank farm where the activity is really picking up. Also, a lot of vapors from over there. What is boosters? I guess it really shouldn't. I don't know. Do we call it booster 7.1 or do we just say B 7.1?
the
There
label.
is the.
There you go.
There's
Enhance.
the close up of the
Nice.
umbilical. So that is suborbital pad B, and you see the lines are vapory and frosty and whatever adjectives you want to use, which indicates that propellant are flowing through those lines. So ship 24 itself should get frosty pretty quickly. So that's where our indication that propellant load is underway, and that should mean we should get somewhere near an engine test in like half an hour-ish. So that's a very rough estimate, but gives you an idea when we might be able to expect that. So B7.1, what is that test tank hooked up to get its whatever it's loading with? It might just be nitrogen, but what commodities is it hooked up? Is it hooked up to the orbital tank farm or something?
7.1?
Yeah, the test tank.
Yeah. It is hooked up to the overall tank farm, and you can actually see right next to it what appears to be some sort of cutie. It's obviously not a cutie because again it doesn't quick.
It doesn't quick. It is not quick, nor does it disconnect. We went through this yesterday.
Exactly. It's an umbilical of and that's actually for ships. That's another place where they can test the ships without it being right there on the pads, and that is actually called the cryo station. So those two places are both hooked up to the orbital tank farm, and they are separate from the orbital launch mod. So the orbital launch mod is also hooked up, but yeah, like and they are not. How to say this? They are not the same thing. Let's put it that way. They have three things hooked up to the orbital tank farm. There you go. I'm getting
Gotcha.
all confused today.
Gotcha.
Thank you for keeping an eye on that, Alex. My goodness.
Chat saying the SLS and Starship rivalry continues. Yeah, they can't even let us stream one without the other. And, all right, now we're getting a bunch of questions about how we're doing so much coverage at once because someone wants to know if we're going to Cornwall for the Virgin Orbit launch that'll eventually happen there. We may have to recruit Chris B to head out there. He can run a live stream for the first time. That'll be fun.
Ooh, crispy on live stream. I love it.
There we go. But yeah, so let's see some more questions for the Starship coverage here. All right. Well, this is not really directly a Starship question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I'm around here and I can do what I want. Dalton wants to know if any of the boosters with 13 flights are scheduled to launch anytime soon. Obviously referring to Falcon 9 boosters. I think there were up to 3 Falcon 9s that have gotten that, right?
I believe so, right? Or was it 2? For sure, there's 2.
One of the boosters. Yeah, they're gonna be launching those. I think it's all the way to 15 flights. So yeah, we should be seeing at least B1060. I think it's the next one, just because of how the refurbishment process and the times that they do. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, and the more Starship questions. Are we expecting a 33 engine static fire? Obviously referring to the Super V booster eventually. Elon said that they wouldn't do a test with all 33 engines, so would they risk it?
I don't think we'll be expecting a 30 engine static fire today, But
Well, not
hopefully when we
today.
get a booster, hopefully when we get a booster back out to the pad with 33 engines under it, I would imagine they'd want to test it out accurately and fully. But things are always in work and changing, so we'll see what the plans end up being.
To be more specific, what he mentioned was a spin prime test of
Right.
all 33 engines. He didn't go and say that it is the like for static fire tests.
There you go. Yeah, so that is a difference that's worth kind of differentiating there. Another question here. Do we think that today's test would be from the header tanks from not Tom B? I'm Tom B, kind of, sort of ish. Anyway, not worrying about the name. The question. I think we were talking yesterday about how we wouldn't really expect too much to be different from the header tanks. The purpose of a spin prime. Well, I don't know, Alex. We were talking about this earlier. I remember asking this question. Would there be any
Yeah.
discernible difference between a spin prime done from the main tanks versus the header tanks?
The only difference that I can think of is just the usage of the plumbing that goes into the engines, so that it will be obviously different source for the logs in this case. Yeah, that's the only reasoning. I know, for example, for static fires, they have done previously static fires from main tanks and from header tanks, and sort of the reasoning was also that that way they can test a static fire test by using the propellants from different tanks. And so that's only what I think could be one of the reasons for that. But I can also think about procedures and checking that the software identifies things like, hey, we're gonna do a static fire of the engines from header tanks. Then we need the software to recognize that as such, for example, right? Or I don't know. I can think a few other reasons, sort of in that vein. That is not actually the hardware, but you're testing sort of the procedures and the software and the pad systems or whatever, but just with a different tank in that same kind of way of reasoning.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, let's bring some more questions. I'm going to try phrasing this slightly better. Have we heard anything about the fate of Booster 7? Some people saying that damage was extensive and it won't fly, but NSF always has more reliable info. Well, a lot of people have reliable info, to be fair, but as far as Booster 7's fate, I don't think we've heard anything other than it's still undergoing repairs and it hasn't been ruled out to return to the launch site, right?
Yeah, so we've seen them take Booster 7 back into the Mega Bay for some repairs and inspections and whatnot. But something that we have noticed is they have removed a few Raptors off the
Right.
bottom of Booster 7. So we don't really know if that means that they're gonna take them off permanently or put them back on or swap it out with some new Raptors, or perhaps they're just taking the Raptors apart to inspect them more detailedly. But we do know that they have removed some Raptors from the bottom of B7, so I wouldn't expect a B7 rollout imminently. We'll have
Yeah.
to see them put those Raptors back on.
I'll mention one thing, and is that if they were wanting to just scrap Booster 7 altogether, why would you remove such amount of engines? Because if you want to inspect some of them, that's cool and that's really reasonable. But why? Like, I think we've seen up to a dozen of them already removed. So it's like, why would you remove so many of them if you're just gonna scrap it? Remember, Booster 4 had all 29 engines installed and none of them was removed when they, sort of scrap it. They were
Right,
basically
sure.
putting it on the rocket garden. So it leads me to think that they're still trying in some way, in some shape or form, at least. I don't know, but it does seem like, to me at least, they're probably gonna be doing all repairs or whatever of sorts, and who knows? We'll see what happens, and see what's possible and what's not. Sort of like a critical condition patient, and they go in and they're like repairing the booster, and they're like, we cannot do anything for him. Well, you just shed a tear and move on, I guess. But yeah.
Luckily, the boosters are, at least at this point, expendable, and there are new ones coming down the line. One of the benefits of having a lot of lots of vehicles in flow at any one time is that if testing goes wrong, you can always resume testing with another vehicle rather than either having to do really extensive and expensive repairs or wait for construction of a whole new one. You already have the next one kind of ready to go. And that'll, of course, also help them build up operational vehicles after testing is done. So, all good things. Keeping the questions rolling here, Daniel wants to know, do we know if it's possible that a pre-burner test could happen without a notice? The official answer is they should not do a pre-burner test without a notice. Every pre-burner test that they've done before the Ship 24 campaign came with a pre-burner notice, or came with a overpressure notice, excuse me. So, and we have no reason to think that that's changed, but since it has been a little while, it's possible. We don't want to firmly say that the pre-burner is impossible because we haven't gotten a notice, if that makes sense.
I have a question, Thomas.
Yeah.
Could SpaceX launch without approval from the FAA? Right?
Well, officially, the answer is no.
But yeah.
But there was
So
that
we know
one
the answer.
time.
Yeah. So there's always like these. Well, officially, in theory, they shouldn't, or they shouldn't be able to. But things can always change, and other things can happen.
And that's part of the fun of following SpaceX and being a tank watcher down here in Texas, because things might be the same from day to day, but then all of a sudden, without any reason, things change on you. So we have to be ready and keep vigilant.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep the questions coming here. This is a good one for Nick here. Have y'all noticed a heat distortion reduction during fall and winter months at the site when we're streaming?
Yeah, so actually that's an awesome question there, Ground Truth. The heat distortion comes from, well, the heat, and Texas is famous for two things. Number one, being extremely large and difficult to drive across in one day, and number two, extremely hot in any month that is not January. So yes, it is definitely a lot less on the heat distortion in the fall and winter months and early spring, when it's a temperate 80 degrees instead of a scalding 110. I don't think it's 110 right now. That's probably what, 80. No, 95. Look at that. So yeah, it's definitely better in the cooler months with a little bit less heat in the atmosphere, disturbing the water in the atmosphere and the, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, so maybe I shouldn't speak on why heat.
Not a weatherologist, but
weatherologist. Yes, that's definitely that's a job title. But yeah, it's definitely much better in the winter months.
Alright, we got another. This is a bit of an opinion question here while we wait for Ship 24 to get frosty again. The lines up to the test stand are already getting some vapors around them, so we know they're getting close to propellant load, but the ship has not actually gotten the tanks on the ship are not quite frosty yet, so propellant doesn't appear to be on board the vehicle yet. But they're probably getting pretty close.
Or it could be on board, but it is right at the bottom of the bulkhead.
Or just barely started, and so yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. But while we wait, we got more questions. So, we always talk about what is the best shuttle. Everyone, we all know it's Columbia. We've gone through this.
Hey. Endeavor.
Nick's on the Endeavor train. Alex, you're on Endeavor too, aren't you?
Yeah, Endeavor. Endeavor is
Alright,
the best.
I'm out number 2-1 on this stream. We gotta get. I don't know anyone else who's on the Columbia fan club train. But
Okay, I'm gonna ask something.
Yeah.
Of all the shuttles, well, the orbiters, only one of them actually has a Crew Dragon named after it. Haha.
So
There you go.
far.
Well, so far. Okay, you won me there.
I also totally had a giant conspiracy theory that the Demo 2 capsule was going to be named Columbia, and then they named it Endeavor, and I was sad. But anyway, it's beside the point. The question here, so we always talk about the best shuttle, but what are our favorite Starship prototypes and our favorite boosters? Want to go around the horn and talk about our favorites? Nick, you get to go first. You're out there in the field.
Okay. Well, I'm obviously partial to the famous ones like 15 and 8 and Booster 4 and Ship 20 and all that, and those are all great and all, but I still have a big spot in my heart for Little Hoppy. I think Hoppy wins the prize. You can't go wrong with Star Hopper. But,
that's a pretty good answer. Hard for anyone to disagree with that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to walk the line of nobody.
What do you think, Alex?
Oh boy, for Starship prototype. See, this is hard. I have never thought about this. Let's put it at SN8, just because of how amazing it was at the time. I think it broke many expectations. Like, many people thought it will just fail at one point, like during ascent or something, and then it basically went 90% all the way, which was amazing. I think that's probably high in my list. I haven't thought about this, so yeah, I'll think about it. Ask me at another time, not another later stream, whatever.
I'll say that my answer is always basically whatever the current ones are. Like right now, my favorite ship prototype is Ship 24 because it's the one being tested right now. And same thing for the booster. My favorite booster is Booster 7 because those are the ones currently slated to do the next exciting stuff. And well, come on, that's a good answer.
No, that's a boring answer.
All right, then fine. Star Hopper. I'm stealing Nick's answer. All right,
There you go.
moving on. We got a super chat here from Space Shuttle Discovery who says, "We all know I'm the best shuttle." Sorry, Discovery, but I know there's a fair amount on the Discovery. What's it called? Fan club, Discovery fan club, if you will. But thank you for the support there, Discovery. We appreciate it. Let's see. Do you have a good question here? Oh, Jacob was asking, what's an ETA on the engine testing? What does the spreadsheet say? I believe that Adrian was saying somewhere along the lines of hold on, let me find it. He did send a message.
I think it was 310, right?
I think he said 310. Oh, he's typing. Hold on. Adrian's typing. The spreadsheet expert who's watching the back channel is going to let us know. Survey says that she's going to say, just kidding, this countdown is weird. They've never done this before, and I don't know anymore. Because Adrian keeps getting frustrated with the new Starship testing. Yeah, okay, so the official prediction from the unofficial spreadsheet that Adrian manages says something along the lines of an engine vent around 2:58 for a T0 at around 3:10 Central Time, obviously. So, should get some engine venting in about 5 or 6 minutes. We'll hope that we're on track there. But anyway, so that's the latest from the spreadsheet. We'll let you know if that changes. Again, still waiting for those signs from the ship. Otherwise, let's see. Another question. What is the point in testing spin primes again? Everything seemed to work the last 3 times. Alex, any ideas why we might be repeating some of those tests?
Because why not one where you can do it 3 times, right? Well, that's a good question. I always say that more data is better, right? Or what was the phrase that Jack usually says? He says something like, yeah, more data, more good, or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Like yeah, that kind of phrase. Yeah, I think it's just that they're gonna be taking more data and making sure that everything works fine, and you know, this is a huge deal. This is like, apart from ship 20, this is the second ship that has been tested with sort of the thought of launching them into orbit. So it is a huge deal, actually. And while we've seen ships being tested before, like SN8, SN9, SN10, you know, the whole deal, those were tested for their own test regimes and their own test campaigns, whereas this one will eventually be put on top of the booster and then be launched into space. That's like a huge deal. So you gotta make sure that it works, and the more data that you gather, the more things that you can tweak, and the more things that you can check, and the more things that you can repair, and all of that. So while I don't have a straight answer for this, obviously, as almost always, the easy answer I'd say is that they just want more data from this vehicle and all the processes and everything. I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, sure. Another question here, this one from Edward, who asks, if Starship was fully fueled, how high could it launch without the booster? Well, oh wait, before we get to this question, Ship 24 has started venting the engine vents. There we go.
Venting.
3 minutes ahead of Adrian's schedule, by the way. So it changed a little bit. And frost is appearing.
And there you go. Yeah, that frost line is starting to appear as well. And Adrian has thus updated his predicted T0. Again, this is nothing official or anything. This is Adrian looking at all the countdowns that we get on these new vehicles and with our best putting forth our best guesses as to when a T0 for the test could be. Adrian would expect the spin prime to occur at around 3:07 Central Time. So we should possibly be just about 12 minutes away from the engine vent. Again, obviously they're changing these plans all the time. This is a test campaign. Things are moving around. So could fluctuate from that either direction. But gives you an idea that we are getting pretty close now that the ship is venting. Again, we are expecting Ship 24 engine testing of some kind. Given no overpressure notice, our best guess would be more spin prime testing. But we could always be wrong on that, and they could be moving into something else. So that's why we're live and taking a look. But to answer this question, if Starship was fully fueled, how far could it go without a booster, Alex?
Well, it's complicated because the ship right now, even fully loaded, will have a hard time to lift off, even if they use the Raptor vacuum engines. Because if you do the math, I'm not gonna do all the numbers right now, but if you do the quick math, it wouldn't be able to lift off as if it were fully loaded. Now, if you underfuel it, say 80%, how far can it go? Well, I did a simulation on Flight Club. Shout out to Declan for that amazing app. And I tried it once to see, hey, what will happen, right? And it reached space, but it didn't reach orbit, which is kind of what I expected, by the way. And but it actually can reach far away. I think in the simulation it got to all the way to Africa. So you get very fast and very far, obviously not to orbit, but quite far away. Now, I think the question is saying how high? Well, how high? Very, very high, because if you can move very, very fast in horizontal, then you can also go very, very high in vertical.
I was going to say, if you just went straight vertical until you ran out of fuel, how high would you get? Well above several of the things in orbit, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good idea for Kerbal later. Anyway, moving on. Another question. Nick, maybe this is a question for you. Greg wants to know how far along in construction are the other ship and booster prototypes. So what's the status of those other vehicles we're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. That's an awesome question. That is one of the big things that we watch for. In order to get something fun like Ship 24 out to the pad, there's literally months and months of work behind the scenes and at the production site to build these magnificent creatures, as this one is alive and definitely venting right now. As far as what the current status is, Booster 8 is coming along. We've seen segments for Booster 8. We've also seen some pieces here and there for Booster 9. But these aren't like super well completed or anything. These are just bits and parts of Booster 9.
And even recently,
go ahead.
Recently we've seen Booster 10's aft-dome and sleeve. So we've seen even parts for Booster 10.
Yes, thank you. I definitely knew that.
I think it was actually you who caught it.
Oh no. There's lots of stuff to catch. And as far as the starships are concerned, we've seen 25's nose section and payload section get lots of love recently. We've seen that payload dispenser loaded onto the payload section of Ship 25. We can see tons of nose cones in Tent 3, Ship 24, or 26, and onwards, all the way back into the tents there. So they're definitely still working on lots of ships in the pipeline. So yeah, definitely the next ones up are Ship 25 and Booster 8, with 9 and 26 following soon after.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So
Folks,
tell
if
me,
you're
tell me
just
about this venting. My goodness, that was a lot of venting. Is that expected?
this is pretty normal, right, Alex?
Yeah, we saw similar venting yesterday. It's just crazy, and it's hypnotic. It's like it's crazy. It is beautiful. I don't know how to explain it. You can even see the flaps, the inside of the flaps getting cold and getting ice on it, which is amazing.
Yeah, that actually
Amazing.
is very cool. I will say, for those of you who are just joining us, NASA Spaceflight is live for 2 separate events happening right now, and an SLS solid rocket booster out in Utah is just seconds away from conducting a test firing. NASA Spaceflight is also live for that. There's live commentated coverage on the NASA Spaceflight YouTube channel. If you want to tune in, now is a great time. Of course, we're not going anywhere for Ship 24 testing. We're staying live here as well, because we should be, I don't know, about 8 minutes or so away from whatever engine test Ship 24 is about to do as well. So, hey, if you've got multiple monitors or enough screen real estate, highly recommend pulling up both, and definitely don't go anywhere, because both of these tests are actually very, very close to happening. We're, of course, also taking questions and things like that. And I think as I'm talking here, this booster is about to fire. Yep, there it goes. The SLS booster is just fired, so that test firing now underway. But the Ship 24 is still venting from the engine section. You can see that frost line has appeared on that test tank, or not the test tank, the LOX tank that is on Ship 24. And so we're getting, based on the spreadsheet that we maintain here, about 7 minutes away from the T0 of the test. So we're getting pretty close here. All right. Question from Osprey: would the water deluge system be used for any upcoming booster static fires? Do we have any insight into how that system will be used?
Well, we have seen it tested once, and it was less of a deluge and more of a grocery store vegetable mister. It was kind of more of a misty situation than a deluge system.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine it will be more delugey whenever they do use it to tamp down some of the energy coming out of the bottom of a booster. They'll probably be testing that in concurrence with static fires and whatnot. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't do that, but I don't believe that's been confirmed.
Right, but it wouldn't make any sense to only use it for launches, but not a static fire, considering the acoustic energy there is going to be exactly the same, right?
Exactly.
At least for 33 engines. While it'd probably be worth testing for things like lesser engines, it might not be as necessary. Depends on the exact situation. What did they use when they fired? Oh no, Booster 3 was on a suborbital mount, so never mind. We don't really know.
It was a sub mount. And if I had my way, they'd test that a little more frequently and let us stand underneath it and be deluged with nice cool water.
You know, that sounds very, very pleasant. Absolutely.
Maybe we need like a water slide from the top of the orbital launch tower. That sounds like fun.
That would be fun. All right, another question here. Do we know what's particularly new on the B7.1 test tank? We knew E-Dome has that new smooth dome, but never heard anything about B7.1. Do we know anything?
I really haven't seen anything about that. I think it's just basically testing the structural loads on the vehicle, but it's really hard to gauge that, because the whole tank is very weird. Like the aft section has the dome of a booster. Obviously, it also has the aft section of a booster, but you know, it has plenty of stringers, especially for the structural test stand. It's weird all around. It just doesn't fit the kind of things that we've seen earlier. And I don't think that we have seen any sort of indication that it is probably things like thinner steel. For example, we've seen other test tanks before with thinner steel for the walls of the tanks and things like that. It's just that it's very hard to gauge what it is actually all about, given the visual appearances of the booster test tank. But yeah, the only thing is that it has a booster aft section, The upper dome appears to be also the forward dome of a booster, but they are all pretty much the same design that we're seeing right now. So they don't seem to test anything new here. It could be just like the SLS test where they're testing only a couple of new things, but they are supporting also a few already things that they are gonna fly right now on Artemis 1 and Artemis 2 and Artemis 3 and things like that. So it could be also something like, hey, this is the same design that is gonna fly, but we're gonna test it and catch all the data that we can for the current design. That could also be a thing, just to
Yeah,
make sure
sure.
that current design is okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Again, folks, so that's that test tank that we see on the right-hand side of your screen to the left of Starship. SpaceX is actually simultaneously testing two things, and so that's what's going on right now. Based on our best guesses, we're a couple minutes away from whatever engine test they're going to go for. Again, we're probably expecting a spin prime test, but don't know exactly for sure. But we'll keep you updated, obviously. Haven't heard any specific details, but the ship is definitely getting close to testing. Wouldn't it be interesting if SpaceX built a test tower with just the equipment to run the chopsticks in a remote location to practice catches? I have thought that was a really cool idea, but that sounds like a lot of work for what might only get used like once or twice,
Yeah, I mean, that would be a good idea if their prime objective is not to hurt the pad, but there's a good amount of data that they can collect just by kind of testing it over the ocean and pretending to be caught, I guess, and making sure they have the accuracy and the throttle capabilities that they're looking for in real life. And they've been working on computer models and stuff on this, so they should have a pretty good idea of how it all works.
Yeah.
And we should be close now to that T0 that Adrian was predicting, so I wonder if we're going to see anything.
Yeah. Just to wrap up that question, my favorite theory has been they're going to build, and this is pure speculation, build a catch tower on the on an oil rig, put it downrange, and use that as the test platform. I think that'd be fantastic.
That'd be very cool.
Anyway, I believe we might have a fair amount of people just joining us now. It looks like live coverage of that SLS booster test has wrapped up. Looks like that test went pretty well. And I believe a whole bunch of people are going to be tuning in from that to see what Starship's up to. So if you're just joining us, hello. This is the other NASA spaceflight people who are commentating the other test. It's a busy day here in the spaceflight world. But Ship 24 is getting close to an engine test any second now. We're joined by myself, Thomas Burkhart. Alex, one of the NSF writers, is here, as well as Nick out there in the field in Starbase. Those are the three voices you'll be hearing. And we are, again, just seconds away from a potential Ship 24 engine test. Probably a spin prime test, but could be something else. We don't know for sure. Also, you got that B7.1 test tank chilling out in the background, no pun intended. As that tank undergoes its own test campaign. So plenty to watch here in Starbase, and we're also answering your questions, so go ahead, tag us at NASASpaceflight if you got any questions. Nick, do you have eyes on it with your own eyes as well? I know you're out there, right?
No, I do not have eyes on it with my own eyes. I'm enjoying the live coverage that we have from our remote cameras because, to be honest, it's a better view.
Gotcha.
Sure, you're cooler that way, rather than out there.
Yeah, there's the shade too. A small aspect of it.
Oh boy.
Musical Wolves wants to know how many streams can fit in a Starship. Well, we got enough monitors.
Now imagine the interior of a Starship full of screens.
We'll need it.
Let's see. Answer questions. What are they testing on B7.1? We just kind of went over this. It's basically there are booster components in that test tank, but other than that, we don't really know any specifics, right?
Yeah. It's really hard to see whatever they're testing on that one.
Also, if we obviously we're probably expecting a spin prime here. If anything else happens, we'll probably get quiet because we'll want to don't want to talk over any big event that happens here. But we should be. We're pretty much any second now. Up there we go. Huh. That looked like a one-engine spin prime or something.
Yeah.
That was not all 6.
Yeah, that looked like a single engine.
That was weird. Little swoop.
Just a small swoop.
It was very close to Adrian's sort of guess at this.
Yeah, but
Saying-
just
he's
before
saying they're late.
309-ish.
Because he's German and he's like, oh, it's off by 1 minute. They're very late.
But yeah, so it looks like we just saw a spin prime test. And of course, like yesterday, there's a distinct possibility that they could do multiple tests. We saw yesterday they did 2 spin prime tests in the same window, so we will definitely keep an eye out for additional testing and stuff like that. We're gonna not go anywhere, but it looks like we just saw a spin prime test. Everyone who's just joining us, there's your first test of the day. We'll see if there's more. I think a lot of you came from the SLS test as well. NASA Spaceflight has been very busy today. We've been in California for a Falcon 9 launch attempt, Utah for the SLS test, and now live coverage from Texas. It takes a lot of resources to do all of these streams, and we thank you all for your support and for tuning in. If you are looking for a way to support the NASA Spaceflight coverage, guess what? We've got new merch. I've been told to plug the new merch. Here it is. New Starship merch, to the moon and Mars. Check out this awesome graphic that the NSF team put together. It's available. Oh my goodness, it's available on a bunch of stuff. I thought it was just a shirt. It's not just a shirt. There's the shirt design. You got the SpaceX. Yeah, there's the HLS design on the left and like the flaps and stainless design on the right. I don't know. Is that the moon design and the Mars design, I guess you can call it. But new Starship merch now available on the NASASpaceflight.com shop. Of course, all of the proceeds to these go to supporting our coverage and improving our coverage. It's got shirts. Let's see if there's a drawstring brag. That's cool. A spiral notebook, the mug, and stickers. A what?
I'm a fan of the bag.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's our first bag on the NASA Spaceflight store. Look at us with the new merch. But some pretty cool merch there. So if you want to support the NASA Spaceflight team and our continuously improving coverage, go ahead and check out that merch. There's also, of course, a whole bunch of other merch and things you can check out on the store. But the new To the Moon and Mars Starship merch is now available. So go ahead and check that out on the NASASpaceflight.com shop. All right, there's the plug. And back, if you were just joining us, a couple minutes ago at 3:09 is when the spin prime test occurred on Ship 24. It looked like it was only one engine or so. I believe, really quick, I want to intro another voice. I think we got someone else joining in. Chris B, do we have you on comms?
You do indeed. I just joined over from the SLS test, which was successful. 2 minute.
Yeah, how'd that go?
A 2 minute static fire test. Not much choice. When you ignite the solid rocket booster, it's going to keep on firing until something goes wrong or it finishes off. And it was complete success by the look of things. So that went well. It was a delayed T0, and you had to ask the FAA for an extra window opportunity, but they got it after phoning them up and pressing the right number on the hotline. Press 1 for FAA extension, and luckily it fired up and well, all went well. So that's a success, and that's all important because let's not forget Starship and SLS are going to work together on Artemis. Both these vehicles working together. It's not one versus the other. It's going to be something that will get us to the moon and onto Mars. So it's very important these things go well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, in the meantime, Chris, thanks for joining us. We're going to have a couple questions here. Feel free to chime in. But let's see. Actually, here's a really good one. Do you think that the FAA will require Starship to have a launch escape system? And if so, how would they do it?
Shall I take that one first? Because that has been the question that's been brought up quite a few times. There's no obvious launch escape tower on top of the Starship. It's something where they're probably working more towards the vehicle itself being the abort mode, where if the booster's going wrong, that makes sense. I personally have not got my head around what happens if the actual ship is having a problem during this, at the point where it's still going uphill, and that itself can't be the escape system because that's the vehicle that's going wrong. So I'm not too sure about the nearest plans on that, but I've got a funny feeling Alex might know something. Oh, maybe not.
No pressure, Alex.
I was a little bit like, hold on, do I know?
It's something that's not been answered, has it? It's not been addressed properly. But
Yeah, I
I always, it sounds a bit too forgiving, really. But I always take the opinion that there's much cleverer people working at SpaceX on these vehicles than any of us on here. And they will have worked out exactly how that works for crew rating the vehicle. I think the important distinction to make right now is that this vehicle will be cargo. Cargo, cargo, cargo. Starlinks, big telescopes, what have you. It will not be launching people for a long time, not after many, many flights, Elon put it, many, many flights before they put people on board this vehicle. And by then, I'm sure it'll have some kind of system that mitigates the issue of crew safety in the abort scenario.
All right. We got a couple questions I want to hit really quick. First of all, what is a spin prime test? I guess we should have talked about this slightly earlier. I'm realizing I'm not sure we really went into detail today. So the spin prime test that we saw happen again a few minutes ago is basically flowing liquid oxygen through the engine, through the pumps, spinning the LOX pumps on the Raptor engine, but not igniting anything. So the preburners on the fuel side don't light. Obviously, the main combustion chamber, no combustion happens there. You're just flowing the propellant through the engine at the rate that you would if you were starting the engine. It's a way to test the turbo machinery in the Raptor engines. And so that's, again, and we just saw earlier what looked like only one engine being spin primed at once. On previous tests, we've seen them do 3 previous spin prime tests, and those were all, it looked like they were all 6 engine tests. It's hard to tell exactly, but it was definitely multiple engines on those previous tests. So, and who knows the reasoning behind why they would be testing only one at a time. Could have been that particular engine had some weird data from the previous test, so they needed to test it again, or any number of other reasons. But that was the test we just saw, and again, like yesterday, there was multiple tests happening in the same window, which is why we're going to stick around until they go to detanking and actually remove the propellant from the vehicle, because then we know they're done. So some more questions. Modi Space Industries, a common name with a $30 super chat. Thank you so much. Lots of talk about what you think the no earlier than time is, but what's your no later than for the Starship orbital launch test? Excuse me. I want to hear a date you can promise it'll launch by. Modi Space, thanks for the support. Appreciate the question. I'll open it up to y'all. Crispy, you get to go first. What's your no later than for the Starship orbital test launch?
Oh, you know what? I hate it. I hate the idea of no later than, because that puts us into the thing called schedule pressure. Now, luckily, there's no, as we mentioned earlier, there's no people on this, so it's not a schedule pressure we always feared during the shuttle program. But I honestly think they will get a launch this year. I think that's a fair thing to say as well. It's not like, oh, if they don't launch in 2 weeks, like Elon said on Twitter 3 months ago. That's not right. That's not good. That's not going very well. This is a lot of things they've got to get out of the way before they get to the point where they get to a launch day. That launch day will only come once they've completed both static fire test campaigns with the booster and with ship 20 with the ship as well. So right now it's ship 24 and booster 7, pending booster 7's repairs. It's a long way off yet. So this year, I think that'd be a great achievement if they launched this year on a test flight. And if it takes them a little bit longer and they get a little bit more success out of it, I think that'll play into it very well, because this is going to be a rapid test program once they get that approval to launch the first one, because the second one will follow pretty soon along.
There you go. Alex, your opinion.
Oh boy. That's dangerous. Well, no later. This is very easy, I guess, depending on the answer that I give. No later than 2023?
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, can I be vague enough? Because I would agree no later than 2023, but I feel like that's way too vague. I feel like chat wants a more specific answer than that.
That's sort of like, oh, when's the launch? Well, no earlier than today, because it cannot be earlier than today, right? That's sort of the same way. No later than. I'm gonna say a little bit more specific. No later than summer of 2023. I think if they don't launch to orbit with the Starship within a year, that's very unlikely, I think, but it will also be probably very disappointing.
You know what? I think I can agree with you on that. No later than summer 2023. I think I would agree with you on that. But again, I'm not sure it's worth a Thomas promise. Don't quote me on that when it doesn't launch by next summer. All right?
I need a T-shirt with that.
No.
Mark.
Couple other super chats that have come in here. Bloodhound with the super chat. Thank you so much. Let's see. Oh, you know what? This is a really good message. Iravel, I'm not sure I got the name right, but there we go. SLS and Starship are in a race, but it's more like a three-legged potato sack race because they need to rely on each other to get humans back to the moon. I like that analogy. That's very good. I appreciate the support there as well. Oh, here we go. This one's for you, Chris. Neil says, successful SRB firing, successful spin prime test, and Leeds beating Wigan. Great results. Believe that's a football reference there.
Actually, it's not. That's why I wanted to take it, because we're still in pre-season in football. But Leeds Rhinos, they beat Wigan Warriors in rugby league. And that's
rugby. Wrong sport.
Leeds Rhinos are a big club and they're not doing too well this season, so they need that win. So congratulations to Leeds Rhinos, because we don't dislike them, because that's rugby league.
There you go. And then another question. What is the spin prime test? Just kidding. Yes, we just talked about that, but thank you for the support there. Appreciate it. Ben asking, have there been any overpressure notices given for this or next week? We have not yet seen any sort of overpressure notices, right?
No.
When's the last time we got one? 2021 sometime, right?
Yeah, it was a long time ago, and that's what's been playing into our mindset, where this testing happens now, and we're saying there's no notice from Mary. Does that preclude a pre-burner test? We're not too sure now, because so much has changed since, in the time that's passed since the last time Mary got a notice. I still think, because it is in the FAA the FAA documentation that says that they will give a notice to the residents, but I think maybe there's a potential it's just for the static fire test. So we'll see. But the proof will be what happens. If they do a pre-burner test and Mary didn't get a notice, we know that's the path forward. If Mary gets a notice and they'll do a pre-burner test, we know that's the path forward. So it's going to be a wait and see.
There you go. Alright, question, is that frost on the flap? Yeah, basically, I think it's just a side effect with the vents right there. So with the flaps are folded against the vehicle like that, that's just, the flaps don't have a tank in it or anything. That's just the vents are spewing right onto the flap, so the flap gets cold.
Yeah, it's not like an airplane with the tanks on the on the wings.
Keep in mind that for orbital launch, for example, the flaps would be extended. They would be out kind of perpendicular to the sides of the vehicle. They're just folded in because, well, the vehicle's not flying today, so they just have them secured against the rest of the vehicle. A question from Spacefarer. Do we have any info about how Starship manages pressure in the cargo section? Would Falcon's fairing vent method still work? So for those not familiar, and it's not just Falcon, most orbital rockets do this, the payload fairing that encompasses the satellites or whatever you're launching have some sort of vent so that as the rocket ascends through the atmosphere, the pressure on the inside would naturally equalize with the pressure on the outside. And that way when the fairing separates, there's not a huge pressure differences that blows the fairing apart or anything like that. My best guess is that a Starship that is intended to launch satellites, such as this type of variant here, would just have a very similar method. No reason to make it any more complicated than that. Have we seen anything specifically?
That will be interesting. I think we've seen in previous Starships some what appear to be some equalization vents of sorts, but I wouldn't be I wouldn't be betting on that. So yeah, don't quote me on that. I'm just saying what I think were equalization bands. But yeah, I'll be looking for them. And when I note those, I'll be like, hey, they are here.
Right, sure.
But so far, I haven't seen it, at least on these most recent ones. Yeah, I guess we'll have an eye on that.
Speaking of which, I've obviously come from the SLS stream, the booster test, and I've noticed that booster 7 is still booster test tank 7.1. There we go. You see, you can tell I'm still on the SLS.
There's so much stuff going on. I don't blame.
Is nice and frosty still, so they're doing 2 tests for the price of 1 here.
We have 2 tests at once right now. Keep them busy. Also, just a note that our good friend Adrian, who's watching in the background, does want to point out that the hold that they're in right now, the kind of condition that the Starship is being held in, is very similar to yesterday. And yesterday, this was in between 2 different tests. So this could be a sign, again, we don't know for sure, but definitely possible, if not even likely, that Ship 24 is going to go to another spin prime flow. But again, we're working on very limited data here. This happened once before. Just want to put that out there as a possibility.
I think I'm
We'd
key
also
indicator
seen-
by the. Sorry, Alex, you go first.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say, we're also seeing that kind of effect of the condensation and frost creeping up. We're seeing just the start of that. You can see it to the right up above on the left camera, right above on where the flaps are. You can see sort of a little bit of the frost creeping up on the right, sort of where the hatch is, and you can also see it on the wider angle camera. There you go. Yeah. And you can actually see it also on the left side if I'm seeing it well. Yeah. So it's the same effect we saw, like the frost creeping up, the condensation going up the tank. And they did another test. If I remember correctly, it was like 1 hour and 5 minutes afterwards. And this one was somewhere around 3:09 p.m. So maybe the next test will also be an hour later. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, I'm getting a bunch of questions in chat about. Actually, a bunch of people are claiming that we probably know exactly what caused the Booster 7 explosion. I don't know who you think we are, but unfortunately, we do not know exactly what happened to Booster 7. All we know is that, obviously, we saw what happened, the detonation near the bottom of the booster there during that spin prime test, and we know they rode it back to the Mega Bay, and we know that they've been removing some Raptors, and so there's been engines that have been coming out. It's unclear whether those engines will just get put onto Booster 8 because they're like salvaging the good ones, or if they're replacing or removing them to be inspected and then they're going to put them back, or they're removing them because they're damaged beyond repair and they're going to replace them with other engines. There's a couple different options they could be going with, but someone correct me if I'm wrong, we don't really have any official word as to what the exact cause of Booster 7, other than Elon tweeted at one point that there was a fuel air mixture risk that led to the explosion, which is we can kind of figure that one out.
I could probably help explain how this all works.
Sure.
The only official source of information about Starship is Elon himself, either in videos or tweets or whatever. When he talks, he represents SpaceX on the program. He's always been like that. They have media officials and what have you, but they tend to be more of like the current launch, the operational launch side of things. You'll then get people on Twitter who probably claim to be a SpaceXer, some are, some aren't. I think we saw when Elon first reacted to the explosion, it was a bad screenshot from our stream, and it basically didn't show when the explosion, just showed a firing. And Elon reacted, said it was nominal, and a bunch of these people who pretend to be SpaceXers were all saying, told you it was nominal test, and of course it wasn't, and when Elon corrected himself, they all deleted their tweets. You then get people in the forums, and even L2 and what have you, who'll speculate on what they think's going forward, and you'll see people take that from L2 or our site and say, NSF says Booster 7 scrapped. And we've never said that. Trust me, there'll be an article on site from me, written by me, if that was the case. You've got to be so careful about how the internet works, because the only official source of information is Elon himself, or things we visually see. If they visually take out Booster 7 from the Mega Bay and chop it into half, we can say Booster 7 scrapped. Until then, Booster 7's still on the table. They've got Booster 8 in the Mega Bay next to it, and even Booster 9 is being built up next to it as well. So it's a wait and see. But be careful what you read on the internet. None of us as me, who runs an internet site.
And one argument that I made when you were on the SLS stream is that you would expect them to not care about removing so many Raptors, right? Booster 4 was sent to the Rocket Garden with all 29 Raptor engines, so I don't think, like, I could see maybe a couple of them just to inspect whatever happened with them and things like that, but I believe we're seeing up to a dozen of them already removed. That's a huge amount of Raptors to be removed. Yeah. I don't know. That kind of makes me think that there's more to it than just let's scrap it.
I would like, I tell you what, I've said it before on a previous stream, that if I was Elon, oh, God help you all if I was, but if I was Elon, I would probably, if providing Boost 7's, only basically, not completely wrecked, and I don't think it is, I would take the opportunity to do some stress testing with it. And I think that's been suggested as well. Do some stress testing with Booster 7 because they want to get through a static fire test campaign where they're going to do first-time operations. The most amount of Raptors they fired at the same time ever is 6, and that's on a ship. so basically they could go for a static fire test, go for all 33 with boost 7. If they lose it, boost rate's just down the road, and they'll probably learn a lot of data from it before boost rate goes down and does its own test cycle. So I would give boost 7 a chance. Remember, everybody was saying boost 7 was scrapped after the transfer tubes were squashed during a test, and look what happened there. So be careful about the demise of booster 7. It may have 9 lives yet.
There you go. All right, let's see some more questions here. What happens to the cargo bay during Starship reentry? Is it pressurized to prevent implosion? I don't know if we have an official word, but we could certainly speculate. I'll leave that. That was an open question to Alex and Chris.
Alex, you go first because I was distracted by an email.
I will guess so, perhaps. Yeah, but
I mean, could you also just have the vents working the same way, and as the Starship descends, the pressure on the inside of the cargo bay will kind of naturally equalize with the air around it, unless they're saying it needs to be pressurized more to withstand forces from reentry?
That's actually what I was thinking about. You could probably pressurize it and have the nose can be stronger during reentry, right? That's sort of also one of the thoughts that one could have about this. Yeah, I can see that happening, sure.
I will give my answer by saying if it gets to that point, it's already a success, because this test launch is going to be dramatic. It's going to be a first-time operation of so many things, that to get uphill, get through max Q as a full stack, get to staging. Oh, spin prime.
Oh, was it? Oh yeah. Yeah, it was. You're right. There you go.
Well,
that's when I'm talking. I don't like clicking
later.
myself when I'm talking. Might be a low volume on.
That looked like another, like it wasn't all 6 engines. That looked like it might have only been one again.
But it seemed to be different. It seemed to.
It's hard to tell with all the
right.
Could have been a different engine.
Yeah, I think it was a different engine. Just by rewatching it right now, it seemed to be coming from a little bit to the right from the previous one.
All right, so that's 2 spin primes for today. And yeah, that happened. Yesterday it took like an hour between the 2 tests. This one was only about half an hour.
Yep.
Oh, all right. Well, that's 2 spin prime tests for ship 24 today, and
or in total.
For our 5 in total.
Is it?
Because there was 1 on Monday, 2 yesterday, and now 2 today.
Yes, because we had an argument about people saying it's the first sprint prime was on Tuesday. Of course, it was on Monday, and that's
no, because Tuesday was the first time they tested B7.1, which they're also still testing now. It's a whole thing. But there we go. All right, so there's another one. Chat saying that some people in chat saying that looked like it might have been 2 engines. It was hard for me to tell because there was a bunch of other vapors in the way.
Yeah.
Which is why I kind of hesitated. I wasn't sure if that was 1 or more.
I did clip it. If you follow me on Twitter, and if you don't, why? I make good use of my 2990.
Oh yeah, I'm rewatching it. Yeah, I was looking at the left side, and yeah, on the other camera you could see 1, and then like 2 seconds later another one. I wonder if that's center engine and vacuum engine, because if you remember from previous spin prime tests, they did first the center engines, and then a couple of seconds later it was the vacuum engines. So could be 1 center and 1 vacuum in this case. I could see that.
Alright, so there we go. I mean, again, this is all, like Chris said, we can only really report on what we're seeing, and sometimes the visuals aren't super clear, but it does look like maybe they snuck in a couple engines that time. And that's the 5th spin prime test, yeah. It's
kind of amusing because we're talking on the SLS stream, on the booster stream, that we know so much about the booster, we know so many things are going to happen, we know the test objectives, we know exactly what the booster's made of, and we were just laughing because compared to Starbase, it's say what you see. Use a bit of speculative education, educate speculation about things, because you've had so many years of following it. You do understand certain parts of the vehicle, and then hopefully Elon tweets something. That's where you stand with Starship. It really is a case of It's not the same as what we're used to with the manuals and manuals and manuals and PDFs of shuttle documentation. It's completely different.
Well, speaking of which, Shuttle, we actually got a question. We were talking about the cargo bay reentry scenario. How did the payload bay on the shuttle work? Because when it came back, it was empty. How did they handle pressurization there? Do you know?
I'm gonna answer that one now.
Alex can interrupt me every single opportunity. Go on, Alex. Go on.
That's a Chris answer. I was making actually a joke about that because previously we were like, oh, who's gonna answer? You go, Chris. I was making sort of that joke. Sorry.
Right. Anyway, I was. So what we're saying is it wasn't pressurized because the shuttle.
Ooh. Crispy will never be allowed to talk on stream again. The ship will just interrupt him again.
I got Alex interrupting me. I've got Ship 24 interrupting me. What's going to be next? It's not fair anymore. The shuttle payload bay wasn't pressurized. Your return. No, the thing about the shuttle payload bay is the fun story is it couldn't open its payload bay doors on Earth. It had to use these actuators, these like yellow bars, which were then prized open. And then on orbit, they had small motors that could work in micro G that would close the doors, but they would lock closed, but they wouldn't pressurize. If you went into cargo bay during an emergency situation where the payload bay doors weren't properly closed, you'd have to wear an EVA suit. That was always the case. You'd never enter there without any EVA suit. It wasn't pressurized.
There we go. That answers the question. Thank you, Chris. Sorry for Alex and Ship 24.
It's okay. I'll get over it.
Hey, I saved you from Ship 24, speaking right in the middle of the explanation. In hindsight, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it looks like the Ship 24 just did a whole bunch of venting. It's not a full detank just yet. The engine section's still venting. There's still frost on the bottom of the liquid oxygen tank. But maybe that's the start of a detanking event, or they're just changing the pressure. I mean, yesterday, did they fire the Alex, you called them the cowbell vents, like the vents that are kind of directed downward that we think are for like attitude control or ullage or whatever?
Yeah.
I don't think they fired those yesterday.
No, I saw them.
They did? Actually, all right, ignore me then.
Hold on. I can actually go and check that out because I follow these things.
For whatever reason, yesterday I thought they did not use those specifically, and I noticed that this time they definitely
used
did.
Them.
All right, ignore me.
They
Never
didn't
mind.
use them. They didn't use them on the one from Monday. So I'm looking here at previous stuff that I had written here. Yeah, they didn't use those on the previous one, or at least. No, actually they used it. They used it just for the first depress vent, not for the final one that they did at the end of the test.
Gotcha, okay. Alright, so we'll keep an eye out as the ship is still prop loaded right now, so we'll keep an eye on whether they're going to wrap up or go into some more testing. Really quick, I want to speed run a couple messages here. Let's see, just a reminder that Endeavour is the best shuttle from someone named Trevor Sesnick. I don't know if Chris has any opinions on.
I don't know that person. Do you know him? I don't know.
I don't know, do we know someone named Trevor? I don't think so. And one quick question, Chris. This is a good question for you. In SLS, will the engines fire for a few seconds before the boosters like Shuttle did, or will they ignite all at the same time?
No, there will be like the same procedure where they'll fire up before... They'll fire up, ramp up to launch 107, in fact 109, in fact they'll go to eventually, but they'll ramp up, they'll gimbal towards launch position like the Shuttle did, and then the SRBs will ignite at T0, and at T0 they're committed. Once those SRBs light up, they're going.
Yep, exactly. And one final question, because Atlantis Space Shuttle says, Ship 24 being very impolite, I'm the only thing that can interrupt Chris.
True, yes.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for hopping on. I think we're going to rotate you out because I think we got another voice joining us here. So Chris Bergen, managing editor of NASA Spaceflight. Chris, thank you so much for hopping on.
My pleasure.
Really quick, a new voice joining the stream. Adrian Bile is joining commentary for us today. Adrian, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. What a quiet day so far with basically nothing happening in the space world, right?
Yeah, no, nothing going on. We've been doing absolutely nothing all day. It's been a super quiet day. None of us have any work to do. Nothing like that.
Perfect.
But you've been keeping track with we've actually been watching for a little bit. Of course, Adrian is one of the writers here at NASA Spaceflight and the person who specializes in keeping track of all these Starship countdowns. And you've been keeping a close eye on the countdowns for all this Ship 24 testing and giving us some insight in our back channels here before you joined commentary of how far away we may be. So, any interesting observations from these couple countdowns that SpaceX has done today?
Yeah, thanks for SpaceX for doing so much while I was trying to play Dungeons & Dragons. Yeah, I watched the test, and also we see the flare, the vent stack going on now. So that's my first observation. Yeah, they are detanking. I think this countdown up until the first spin prime test was, well, pretty standard. I'm quite happy with how it was all predicted, and yeah, it looked normal to me, and this looked like a standard countdown for a ship. After that, of course, they hold it shorter than yesterday and conducted the second test. So yeah, it's I would call it kind of usual spin prime so far. But of course, we don't know what will be next right now, because as we pointed out in yesterday's stream, yes, they are detanking right now, but we don't know what's next. This window is still going on for 6 hours and 19 minutes, so lots of room for more activity.
Yeah, we're going to stick around as long as as long as the road is closed, and because that means testing is still underway. Although B7.1 is also being tested too, so as long as there's something interesting to show, like Ship 24 still being prop loaded, we're not going to go anywhere quite yet. But let's see, Adrian, I've got this question. This actually came in a little bit earlier in the stream, but I knew you were joining us in a bit, and I wanted to ask it while you were here, because I think I know your answer. Maybe I don't. The question is, what rocket do we think will be the first Methalox rocket to orbit? So I'm going to preface this question while you two think about your answers. Using liquid methane and liquid oxygen as your liquid propellants for a rocket, while not a new idea, is becoming a thing for many next-generation rockets based on its ability. You can produce liquid methane on Mars, for example. It is producible with Martian resources, I guess is the word I'm looking for. It's also, you can operate it carbon neutrally, because you can capture carbon from the atmosphere and use that to make your liquid methane. So there's some environmental considerations there. And SpaceX has demonstrated with the Raptor engine that you can make some pretty high performance engines with that fuel. So it's kind of becoming a new thing. SpaceX is not the only one. Obviously, the Blue Origin New Glenn rocket is going to be Methalox fueled. The first stage of United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket is Methalox fueled. The Rocket Lab Neutron rocket is a Methalox rocket. And then you can go... and Relativity Space. I was going to say Terran 1 and Terran R are both Methalox. And then outside the United States, there's also a Chinese rocket, Zuki 2. Do I pronounce that right?
I believe you pronounce that right.
Cool. Zuki 2 is a new Chinese rocket that is also going to be Methalox fueled. So a bunch of new rockets coming down the pipe, and a lot of them are slated for launch in the relatively near future. Adrian and I co-wrote an article back in March. The title was Methalox Race Likely to be Won in 2022, but the winner not yet clear. We're a little bit farther into 2022. I think we're still in the mindset that a Methalox orbital rocket will launch this year. At the very least, Terran 1 is probably the closest in my opinion. But I'm going to open it up to Adrian and Alex. What do you guys think is the first of these Methalox orbital rockets? Well, actually, hold on. The question is the first one to reach orbit, so not the first one to attempt, but the first one to be successful in reaching orbit. Slightly different question. Adrian, you want to go first?
Yes, I actually, as I predicted earlier in March when we wrote that article first, and I still go with that prediction, I think it will be Zuki 2 from China, because we know that the rocket is fully assembled. We know they are basically in testing of that rocket, and it is, from what I can tell, of course, with China, it's kinda iffy always to get concrete information about rockets, but they are basically using a Changsheng, from the Changsheng main body structure. They're using a relatively simple engine, so I believe they have a good chance to reach orbit in the first attempt. So yeah, I actually think it will be Zuko 2 that will be the first methane-based rocket in orbit. But yeah, I think it will be a close race between them and Terran 1. I think these are the one that are in the lead right now. That's my personal opinion on it.
All right, Alex, you're up. What do you think?
Oh boy. Jeez, these questions always kill me. I'm gonna say I'm between Terran 1 and the Chinese one, the Suko 2, whatever. Because it does seem like those two are closer to launch than, for example, Starship or Vulcan, or well, Neutron is like 2024 or even later, right? So yeah, I'm gonna go with either of those two. I think those are probably safe bets. Now, well, I should point out though, those two are very new rockets, but one of them, for example, the Suko 2, I think it is based on the Long March 2 or something like that. Adrian knows better about that. I can see maybe that going to orbit having more chances of being successful on doing that. Whereas Terran 1 is
It's
totally
all
new.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So while I see it probably being on the race, like on the top 1 or 2, to be the one to launch first, to orbit, which is the question that was asked. I don't know. I'm not that sure. It could fail. There's chances that it could fail because it will be an all new launcher. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. And to be honest, same thing with the Starship and Vulcan and all the other rockets. They're new after all, and even Vulcan. That could be a little bit of controversial opinion probably for a few people, but I do think that it's not free of risk, just because it is based on the technologies from Delta and Atlas. It's just, it could always have some sort of issue, and but it's
At
fine.
least the first
it's a
stage.
test
The
flight.
first stage has a lot of new stuff, of course.
Yeah. Well, and the second stage is Centaur 5, right? It's a large.
I mean, the tank
version of
size
the
is different,
Centaur.
but you would have plenty of confidence in the RL-10, for example, right?
Yeah.
The parts of it are you could have some faith in. The SRBs have already been flying on Atlas 5. The fairing, already flown on Atlas.
There's some things that you are sure they're gonna work, or at least a huge confidence of them. Now there's a bunch of things that are new. You're like, it could fail, right? So yeah, that's and again, as I was trying to say, is it's a test flight. The first 1 or 2 flights of a rocket are usually test flights, and well, unlike SLS, which is a test flight, but you wouldn't want them to lose the first SLS. Whereas
SLS is one of those vehicles that leverages so much hardware that have flown on
Exactly.
previous vehicles. Like, there's very little on SLS that's brand new. I guess that would be limited to the Orion capsule itself, really. And even Orion has had, a lower fidelity test flight. So, like, SLS is probably one of the higher confidence test flights when you're comparing all these new vehicles. And Starship Raptor has a little bit of experience with high altitude flight tests. But the Super Heavy hasn't flown.
Yeah, but one example, like the actual example that I was looking for, is that if they fail Vulcan's first flight, for example, it's not the end of the world or of the end of any program at all.
Sure.
Now, if you fail SLS first flight, it's like, oh boy,
that's a bigger problem.
that's
True.
the whole Artemis program balancing on that single rocket, right? So it's and there's other issues like hardware production and all that is more worrisome in that case. Whereas Vulcan and all of these other rockets, if they fail on the first flight, it's still a test flight, so not a huge deal to lose them.
So yeah, so let's go. So to wrap up our question here, I think it's safe to say New Glenn and Neutron are both pretty far off. They're very new concepts. They're not very far along in development yet, and so those two we can probably rule out as winning the Methalox race, if you will. I'm definitely going to defer to Adrian's opinion on Zuki 2. So if he thinks that Chinese rocket is going to beat Terran 1, I would probably just take his word for it, because Adrian follows the Chinese spaceflight program probably closer than anyone else here at NASA Spaceflight. So that's worth mentioning. Of the American rockets, I think Terran 1 is a pretty clear favorite right now. The big question marks are, of course, Starship, which the Starship schedule is always really hard to predict in any way. And then Vulcan, ULA keeps saying that Vulcan's on track to launch before the end of the year. We haven't seen a whole lot of hardware for Centaur 5 yet, but it's possible that ULA isn't building things out in the open, so it's very possible that it's just not, not say big. That's not something that they're just showing yet, I guess. But we know that they're getting close to getting their first stage engine and stuff like that. So Vulcan is somewhere in the realm of near the end of this year too. So depending on Terran 1 delays and stuff like that. And of course, like we mentioned, of all of these vehicles, the one with the least flight heritage is Terran 1. Terran 1 is basically all brand new. So the odds of the first flight being completely successful is lower than the other ones. Could happen, but would also be understandable if it takes a second try or so to reach orbit. So there we go. Hopefully that answers your question. Squeak Squawk 4, thank you for the question there. Love talking about that stuff. We've got some more questions here.
Can I quickly point out something?
Yeah, go for it, Adrian.
The the vent stack is off again.
And what does that mean for people who don't know what that means, aka me?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but basically during the whole process yesterday where they saved their vehicle, it kind of was on all the time, right? So
it seemed to be on, off sometimes. We'll see what happens. But yeah, you point out something really interesting. And have I seen the recondenser?
Yeah, it's
popping
puffing
off. Okay.
Also, the frost line is not receding. I A/B checked. The frost line is still kind of consistent. So I'm not sure if we are done here. That's all I'm gonna say for now.
You're saying this looks different from just pure detanking operations.
Yeah, this looks more like, at this point, more like getting the vehicle like in a hold again and see what's next.
Gotcha. All right, well, we'll keep an eye on it, but thanks for pointing that out.
The engine vents also stopped, which they usually do. I'm looking at the patterns from yesterday. The vent stack was like idle for a bit, then stopped, and that also coincided with the engine vents stopping, and they rarely came on, and then there was the depress vent, and that was it. So I think it's still inconclusive. I'll say that, just comparing it to yesterday, just looking through the stream.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye on it. Yeah. We got a super chat here from Olaf, 10 pounds, or 10 euros, excuse me. Thank you so much. Says, back in the Mark 1 days, SpaceX would project movie nights. Could we convince them to show The Fifth Element? Hey, Adrian, any progress on that front yet?
No, I went to sleep yesterday after the stream. After that I worked, and now I'm sitting here again in the stream, so it's not like I had to.
What you're saying is NSF needs to stream you watching Fifth Element.
Yes, that will be a members only
content. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Thanks for the support there, Olaf. Question, still curious about if 3mm steel plates is still a thing. It's been a while since we've heard anything about that, huh?
I'm right now thinking about what's the status on that, because...
Well, haha. You know what? Actually, Ship 24 has 3.6mm section. I think it was 3.6. That's the payload base section. So where the mailbox thing you see right there on Ship 24, a couple of rings up and a couple of rings down, that section is the payload base section. And starting from Ship 21, those have been made out of 3.6mm thick steel walls. So there you go. Mainly because we've seen those on labels. We've seen 3.6 millimeter and all of that. So it was very clear that it was thinner steel, just because of the label. For
Yeah.
reference, the other steel is 4 millimeter, so it's 4/10ths of millimeter thinner. Which you'll think, well, that's not a huge difference, but you know it can shave a couple of tons probably of mass from the ship.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you so much. Jane Pixel has become a Red Team member, so Jane, thank you so much. And she also sent a super chat. It says, "Have been watching since the days of Hoppy. Thought it was about time I showed my appreciation of the work you guys do." Jane, thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it and appreciate the kind words. And thanks for tuning in. We're glad you've been watching for so long. Plutonium with a question. When Starship returns from its orbital flight, will the steel turn to a rainbow color? I'm assuming talking about like from the heating and the reentry, will the steel be changing color? I've seen speculation to that effect, but I don't know. I'm not a material science expert, so I'm not entirely sure. Wondering if you guys have heard anything.
Oh, I have no deep knowledge on that, so I just want to point out it would be cool.
It's true.
Oh yeah.
All right, another question, just a super chat here from Michael. So Michael, thank you so much. And J Torch became a PadRat member, so appreciate everyone who's joining on the YouTube membership program. Hope you all enjoy your perks. Grease with a question. Is there any rocket that doesn't have to throttle down at max Q? I know the answer, but I want to know if either of you know. I can think of at least... Well, okay, alright, solid-fueled rockets don't count. I'm assuming the question is limited to liquid-fueled rockets.
Well, hold on.
I wanna bring in Ares 1.
I will argue there that they actually throttle down. Solid rocket motors can actually.
Oh, they're like you when they cast the grains, it's set so that it'll throttle down. Yeah.
If you were on the previous stream, you saw Chris G actually talking about this. I was listening in, by the way. So yeah, you can actually throttle down solid rocket boosters. Now the obviously pre-plan, like you plan for the booster to go through max Q and all of that in certain parts, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Saturn V didn't throttle down for max Q. I don't think it throttled down for max Q.
I know that the center engine shut down near the end of the burn. And
yeah,
they,
but that was
finished in the last 4, but that's not really throttling.
Yeah, that was for G loads, but like for max Q, and I know Ian is in the back channels. There you go. Saturn V did not throttle. I was right.
Okay, but so did the F1 engine have throttle ability? Like, was it physically possible and they just didn't? F1 engine cannot throttle. Okay, I know of at least one rocket whose first stage engine has the ability to throttle but doesn't at max Q. I'm trying to know. I'm wondering if either Alex or Adrian knows what rocket I'm talking about. If you're in the back channel, don't give it away. I want them to know.
Nope, I have no idea.
No, Ian, don't give it away.
I knew it. I knew it.
No, you can't delete the message. They already saw it. All right, I'm gonna say it before you guys can. Antares used to throttle down, but then they upgraded the structures on the rocket, and so the engine can throttle, but Antares does not throttle itself at max Q anymore. It fires full throttle the whole time. So that's my answer. I know of at least that one. There are a couple of rockets that are liquid fueled, but the liquid engines don't actually have throttle ability. I don't know. I probably couldn't list all of them, but Saturn V was one, so there you go.
And also, I think Soyuz doesn't throttle down either.
I'm sorry, which one?
Soyuz.
Oh,
See, we were
wouldn't surprise me, but I don't
US
know.
rockets. We're talking about US rockets, but I think
but
Soyuz doesn't throttle down either.
I wouldn't be surprised if, like, Adrian, do you know if the Chinese rockets have throttle ability?
I'm thinking about that right now, but I am not sure. I wouldn't be surprised if especially the early ones, the hypergolic based and the ICBM based rockets are not able to throttle.
Sure.
But I cannot confirm. but it wouldn't surprise me because it would fit there. I feel like they're basically brute force heritage.
Also, I mean, to tie this back to, of course, the Starship testing that we're looking at, we would expect the Super Heavy booster to throttle down during max Q. I think it's well established. Obviously, Raptor can throttle. You need to do that for landing.
Well,
but,
actually,
yeah.
Elon said they wouldn't throttle down for max
For
Q.
max Q?
That's their goal.
Oh, their goal.
So,
okay,
hold on.
so that doesn't.
So,
they might not necessarily
there was an
start
interview.
there.
Yeah, there was an interview a few months ago. He mentioned that ideally they don't want to throttle down during max Q, and he actually mentioned about 50 kilopascals of pressure. That's about half an atmosphere for reference. And also for reference, usually rockets like Atlas V or Falcon 9 tend to reach a max Q of about 25 kilopascals to 30 kilopascals. So this will be about double the amount of pressure on the vehicle during ascent than traditional rockets like Falcon 9 or Atlas V. So it will be very interesting to see how the Starship look. Like thinking about, for example, them doing max Q tests on nose cones. If you remember from last year, yeah, it was last year. They did tests on nose cones, and we thought, well, this is for max Q. Now it makes sense if you think about it, because if they're not gonna throttle down, their utmost sort of worry will be to crush the nose cone or something like that. I should also note that even though it is higher max Q, it is also not a huge amount of pressure. It's still like half an atmosphere, but half an atmosphere is a lot of force on the nose cone still. So you gotta make sure that it is that it supports the extra pressure. So that's the whole thing.
I have some observation I want to share.
Go for it.
Go
If
ahead.
you look at the frost ring, you can now see it starting to melt. Because if you AB for a bit, like if you AB about 5 minutes, you can see how this main frost ring we have seen all the time was consistent white. And now you can see these gray spots in there. And I think that's the frost ring starting to melt, because probably inside there's no longer locks that keeps it up. So I think we see some more underlying information here that they are indeed detanking this vehicle, and this is a vehicle getting a bit hotter now.
All right, we're going to keep an eye on that, of course, but thank you, Adrian, for pointing that out. A couple super chats have come in here. Ribby with a $10, just no message, but just saying thanks, so appreciate that. And Pink Mouse says the 25th of this month will be the 3-year anniversary of Hoppy's maiden flight. Any plans to celebrate? Oh, well, Ship 24 is celebrating by starting to vent again.
That's the engine
From the
again, but
from the engine chill vents.
Yep.
But that
Which
doesn't
also-
mean it's,
we've
Yeah,
seen that
but-
during detanking. So.
exactly.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We saw yesterday a few people being like, "Oh, haven't you seen at the live stream? It's venting from the engine vent, so it means it is getting loaded." And it's like, it doesn't really mean that. It's just that they're flowing things through the engines probably, but not much beyond that. It's when it is the other way, when it is completely empty, and then you see the engine vents, you're like, "Oh, it's getting stuff."
Also, as Michael pointed out here, the flare vent stack is still
Yeah.
going slightly, so this is not on, and also the recon sensor is not on, and the tank farm is not on. So
There you go.
this is not a vehicle getting ready for something. This is a vehicle right now getting saved.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing that we saw yesterday.
Yeah, we're looking
we
at the
actually-
flare stack, and again, I want to point this out because for a second, honestly, it's been so long since I've been looking for a flare stack, I kind of forgot where it was. The 3 dark tanks that are right next to each other on the left-hand side of your screen. The stack in front of that is what is it's still the flare stack, but obviously they don't light it on fire anymore. But that particular vent is what we're looking at when we say the flare stack. And of course, behind those tanks is where the recondenser is, and you see no vapors coming from there. So those are the things we're pointing out when we say flare stack or recondenser.
I think we can still see it was a flare stack formally because you can see it being burned at the top, right? I think that is...
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can still see that it used to burn.
So back to this question: how are we celebrating the Hoppy's anniversary, huh?
That's a good question. I will drink a bottle of water.
Because it's a water tower.
Yeah, but unfortunately that bottle cannot fly.
Well, if you throw it hard enough.
Yeah, you could launch like a water rocket to celebrate Hoppy's birthday.
There you go.
And
We'll
make
have
a
to
water
do that.
tower fly.
Pig Mouse, thanks for the super chat question there. We appreciate that. Meanwhile, Chad is just asking, what's up with B7.1? It's still back there, and it's still doing something. But that's all we got.
I mean, this is a good usage of them for pad time, right? Because they cannot work on anything on this pad right now while one of these vehicles is getting tested. So why not test them both at the same time so you reduce the idle time you cannot work on infrastructure? I like this approach, and I think it's a good thing to line up these tests together.
A question here from Dean. How does the ship's reentry profile differ between Earth's atmosphere and the Moon and/or Mars? Well, I'll take the easy one here. The Moon doesn't have an atmosphere, so you're moving from lunar orbit to the lunar surface is all propulsive. You're just firing engines the whole way to slow yourself down. But on the Earth and Mars, obviously Mars has lower atmospheric density. In other words, the air is not as thick. Also, you have much less gravity. So how would we expect those reentry profiles to look different? I mean, I'm not sure the shape would be that much different. Mars would take longer, right?
Yeah, I think Mars would basically be either a bit steeper to make up for that being not that dense enough, or like be just longer, because you would slow down lower on Mars, right? I mean, that's just... I mean, somebody might soon correct me here, but I think you should slow down slower on Mars.
Well, it depends. So it also depends on where you're coming from, because if on the way to Mars, you're probably not going to bother inserting yourself into orbit around Mars first. And so you might be coming in on an interplanetary trajectory, which you're going to be coming in a lot faster. You'll probably descend a lot steeper, and it'll be a faster reentry because you don't want to skip off the atmosphere or anything. At Earth, for example, if you're returning from Mars, for example, or from the Moon even, obviously HLS wouldn't do that, but if in the future, if you have an atmospheric reentry from beyond low Earth orbit, that would also similarly be a steeper profile because you want to make sure you don't skip off the atmosphere, stuff like that. And that would be different from a low Earth orbit reentry. So those things are different, but it depends on where you're coming from more than where you are actually.
The entry on Mars, it's usually between 5 to 7 kilometers per second. I don't know the conversion to miles per second, but you can Google that. But here on Earth, if you're coming from low Earth orbit, it's usually about that high end of 7 kilometers per second, probably a little bit more like 7.5. But yeah, if you're coming from interplanetary trajectory, you're coming in at something like 12 kilometers per second, sometimes even 30. So it's about double the amount of speed that you're going from a low Earth orbit reentry. So yeah, it's sort of different. But again, also the Mars atmosphere, in some ways, it is not that different from the upper parts of the atmosphere here on Earth. So you can test reentry on Mars by faking it on the high parts of the atmosphere in some sense.
Right.
They actually, with Falcon 9, if I remember correctly, with the reentry burns and things like that, they had a program with NASA like 7 years ago or thereabouts to actually film reentries of Falcon 9 boosters.
Oh yeah.
For richer propulsion.
Isn't that a thing for Starship too?
Yeah, it should be also for Starship in the future. Once it re-enters from orbit soon, we hope. Yeah, They already have a program in place for that too.
All right, and so let's see. We got another question here from Travis. Has there ever been an operational hybrid solid fuel and liquid oxidizer rocket booster? Wouldn't they be safer and easier to throttle? Off the top of my head, the only one that's flown is Virgin Galactic.
Yeah,
Which I don't know if
one
that counts as
from-
our booster per se, but
Yeah. But that one, I think it uses nitrous oxide, I think. So it's
oh
not.
yeah, I guess it wasn't
I
pure
think,
LOX, but I
yeah.
think this mean a liquid oxidizer
And
of
isn't
some
that a
kind.
gas and not a liquid? Or do they store? I'm not sure how to store that.
Oh
one.
gosh, now you're making me question everything. Hold on.
Yeah, right.
Spaceship 2.
I just decided to stay away far from this question because I can only lose here.
You know,
Um,
doesn't China also have hybrid rockets? Something?
You see, that's what when I meant with but I can only lose. But at least the Changsheng rockets, there's only one, I think, that uses solids, and that should be 8. Every other should be either
8
be
is an 11.
yeah. Oh my God. Good morning.
See?
But yeah,
Oh boy,
that
I
was
knew something about Chinese rockets that Adrian didn't remember.
and I think that was even like they mentioned that was the first solid boosters that were ever used on Chinese rockets, if I remember correctly, right? So
Yeah.
it's not really a thing.
Oh well, you meant boosters. Okay, yeah. The 8 one has solid rocket boosters on the outside. That's what you meant?
Yeah, that was the first time they used solid boosters.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
I thought you
they never
were
did
meaning
before.
solids in general, which
Yeah.
I think Long March 11 has the first stage is solid rocket booster, sort of like Vega.
Yeah, we also have one upcoming that will be launching probably in this month, maybe next month. That is Zonky 1A, which also has solids. So, yeah, it's coming up. It's becoming more, but I don't recall this a special example somewhere.
I also know
Okay.
off the top of my head, there's that company Via Space that is based here in Florida that they're working on some hybrid rocket technology. That's the only other one I could think of. A quick Google search told me that Virgin Galactic's motor is liquid nitrous oxide. So
And
that's
it
what
is
Google
liquid.
was telling me. But, yeah.
Okay. They cool it down.
But yeah,
Sound-
hybrids suffer from a performance perspective a lot of the time. And it is, I mean, liquids have generally speaking been the standard, if you will. And there's a lot of experience firing liquid engines, so good question there.
You can see the frost ring now being basically almost completely melted.
Yeah, it's still melting, right?
Yeah.
LK Aviation, where on the Starship will it dock to the ISS or Lunar Gateway, etc.? My assumption has always been like the nose cone, like kind of a head-on docking, if you will. But I don't know if we've ever gotten good information on that.
That would be problematic with the header tanks, right?
Well, HLS won't need a header tank,
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
so HLS could do that.
Yeah. And we have another S-24 showing us its engine vent again.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that would be... I couldn't see a reality where it docks to a space station just sideways. But I mean...
I mean, obviously, if you're going to do a variant for the International Space Station, which again, that's something like SpaceX has like proposed as like, yeah, Starship could be used for low Earth orbit logistics, but it's never been like, it's not officially planned to do that at any point yet. It's just been a proposed use that they could design a variant for, basically. If they were going to do that and it was going to have to return to land on Earth, obviously you would need the fins, you would need the header tank, and so the docking port would have to be like on the side or something. That would be for that. But for HLS, when you don't need to land on Earth, there's no plans for fins or anything, you wouldn't need a header tank.
Yeah, that's true. And I think for the ISS Starship might just be a little bit too late anyway. That's at least my
Right.
my
Well, you could also
feeling.
just say to a low Earth orbit station in general, not
Yeah,
necessarily
okay.
the ISS. Yeah.
Yeah, then I think for that you need a special like sideways design, because then you would need header tanks. But yeah, for HLS, good point. I didn't think about the fact that they don't need header tanks for that. Yeah, then I guess I go with the Thomas idea here of no stocking.
Kyle asking if HLS won't return to Earth, how would it be serviced if needed? It could return to Earth orbit by never actually re-entering Earth's atmosphere and landing there. You gain a couple things. First of all, obviously you don't need fins or anything like that, and the vehicle can be optimized to carry mass to the lunar surface, which is the whole point. Also, you can paint it. We've seen all of the renders of HLS are painted white rather than bare stainless steel. Obviously, that doesn't really work for reentry because the paint will just be burned off, and you'll lose the thermal conditioning. The reason most things in space are painted white is because that helps thermal management. It won't absorb a whole bunch of heat from the sun and heat your cryogenic propellants that are on the inside. So you get a little bit of a benefit from a boil-off perspective when your vehicle is white like that. But they could always fly to low Earth orbit and then service it there. Could also be serviced while docked to the gateway station. Imagine a spacewalk happening outside Lunar Gateway, and Starship's docked there, and you're servicing the vehicle there, or something like that. That could be really cool.
I have a question. So,
Yeah.
if paint helps against boil-off, would they paint the Mars vehicles as well?
Well,
Because they are on their way a long time.
Right, so here's the thing. The Human Landing System, HLS variant, also has to do, it has to do with translunar injection. It has to deorbit all the way from lunar orbit to land, and then return all the way back to Gateway. So it needs more propellant than a Mars vehicle, which basically does the trans-Mars injection relatively soon after launch, probably. And then all it needs for the rest of its mission is the header tank fuel to land on Mars, and presumably it would refuel on Mars, rather than land with enough propellant to come all the way back. I don't think that's realistic, right? The trip between Earth and the Moon and loitering in lunar orbit for maybe a week or so, or a couple weeks for Orion or something like that, that's a much shorter time than going all the way to Mars. And I think even if you painted the Mars vehicle white, you'd have boil-off issues at that point. But in the header tanks, which are just much smaller pressure vessels, it's way easier to maintain the right conditions in those tanks to keep the propellants from boiling off. So my guess is that you won't need it on the way to Mars because you will only need the landing fuel, and that'll be in the header tanks. And thus, painting it white doesn't really do much. That would be my guess.
Yeah. It was more like a quick thought, because that sparked that thinking.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I definitely want to see more about all the different variants of Starship and how exactly they'll look different from one another. Someone is asking, chat, what is HLS? So to clarify, the Human Landing System is NASA's name for the moon lander, and SpaceX proposed, obviously, a Starship variant for that program and was selected. So the HLS variant of Starship, you have seen renders of it painted white. It's got solar panels. It doesn't have fins. It's basically the lunar optimized variant of Starship, and it is the moon lander for the Artemis program. So that's what we're talking about when we say HLS, because that's just the NASA program name that Starship is part of.
By the way, we should say maybe about this road closure is that even if they save S-24, we don't know how fast they will open the road and everything because of B7.1, right? Because even if one vehicle is saved, there's still another one being tested. So that should also be pointed out about the process we might have to look at here.
Right, exactly. So the road, I'm assuming, obviously, the road is still closed. I think we will even have a camera view to show the roadblock. But the road will not necessarily open as soon as Ship 24 testing is done, because B7.1 is also being tested. There you go, Michael, thank you. There's the roadblock. You can see the sheriff is still there, obviously. No one going to be head to the launch site anytime soon, because even if they are done with Ship 24 testing, the B7.1 test tank is still very much active, so they wouldn't be able to open the launch site yet. So unfortunately, that won't be a good indicator, but the indicator would be a full detank and complete lack of activity on both Starship and the tank farm. Right now, it's kind of hard to say. The ship is still venting from the engine chill vents, but that we saw that, which we've seen both on when the ship is getting ready to do an engine test, but also when they're getting ready to detank. So it's not super clear yet. We see no activity on the tank farm right now. So we'll basically, if we see something that pretty obviously indicates that they're either done or spooling up for another test, we'll let you know. But right now we're kind of in limbo to see if they're done or not.
Yeah.
Alright. A super chat question here from Bryant. What is the purpose of the venting in the flare stack? What's the purpose of having gases venting around the structure during the fueling process? Either of you want to take that one?
You want to go ahead, Adrian?
Well, it's a good question. What's the purpose of venting and the flare stack? So previously, this flare stack was used to burn the methane before it is released into the atmosphere. It seems like it might just be the rest of this procedure, and there still might be like some sort of a part that still gets released into the atmosphere, but it definitely isn't in that intensity and force that we saw it while it was the flare stack. Like when we were in a time when this was still a flare stack, it was showed a lot of activity, and especially close to T0, it showed a lot of activity, which we don't see anymore. That is now taken over by the recondenser. But it seems like it still serves some sort of purpose during the saving process, but I don't know for sure how it is involved and what exactly is the purpose. What's the purpose of having a gas venting around the structure during the fueling process? I have a high suspicion that this gas vent... oh, it's not gas, so sorry. I said I read grass vent, it's gases venting. Wow.
The grass vent is just a joke that we make fun of Adrian, because there was that vent off in the middle of nowhere. That doesn't mean anything. But people would always ask Adrian, alright, when's the T0?
Yeah, it's a fun vent. But in general, a lot of these vents we see are also sometimes not vents, as in there's gas leaking somewhere, but in condensation that is forming around cold structures. Because if you have this kind of cold surfaces, there is condensation around it. So a lot of these is not always gases in the atmosphere, but condensation around the cold pipes and the cold steel all everywhere. So that is also what you need to consider, especially when you see these huge condensation going up from the tank farm. That often is just surfaces getting cold.
All right. Yeah, and a lot of these vents are also combined with maintaining the right pressures at the tanks, for maintaining the right temperatures in the tanks, and it's a way of venting off boiled off propellants, things like that. That's what they're all about. Those engine chill vents have all but stopped right now, by the way.
Yeah, it seems very quiet at this point, compared to... Yeah, at this point, the suborbital tank farm is basically completely quiet, right? It's
right.
It's only
We're
B7.1.
missing that final depress vent, though.
Yes, like yesterday, it was basically the last thing before they opened the road. A big depress, and then open the road. But of course, with B7.1, we cannot count on the road opening indicator. So I guess our big indicator to watch right now is the final gas depress of Ship 24.
Alright. Well, we've got more questions coming, so we'll do that. Nick's saying, why do they use a header tank for landings? Alex, you want to talk about that?
I think he's away for a second.
Oh, my bad. Sorry, Alex. I'll start this answer. Alex can chime in a bit. But the purpose of a header tank is basically, it's a much smaller tank. On Starship, it's located in the nose cone. And basically, it protects against fuel slosh. So if you have a vehicle that's coming in for landing, if you were using the fuel from the main tanks, the fuel would probably be settled it could be settled anywhere in the tank, or it could be sloshing around because the vehicle's falling, right? Especially on Starship, since it'd be like belly flopping, the fuel wouldn't actually be near the quote bottom of the tank. It would be near the side of the vehicle that's belly flopping, and thus you wouldn't have a really stable supply of fuel to start your engines. And so you start your engines using fuel from the header tanks, because they're small, kind of mostly spherical tanks. There goes the engine chill vents again, by the way. So that you have a more reliable fuel supply to start your engines again for the landing burn. That is the purpose of a header tank. And also, like I mentioned earlier, if you're going to travel all the way to Mars, header tanks are much smaller and also easier to maintain your pressure and temperature conditions for the fuel to not boil off. So that's another benefit for those applications as well.
We see the engine vent again.
Yeah.
So more, there's a lot of liquid and gas in this vehicle. They need to get rid of.
Mist asking a question, will Gateway's orbit decay and crash into the moon? Well, unlike things in low Earth orbit, where there's still, obviously there's not a full atmosphere, but things in low Earth orbit over time do naturally decay due to a few atoms of atmosphere, even at those altitudes. When you're orbiting the moon, it's even less. So I don't know what the natural decay time for something in lunar orbit is, but it's way longer than the ISS, or way longer than things in low Earth orbit in general. My understanding is they won't even need to have orbit maintenance reboost burns or anything like that in that kind of orbit. Now the Gateway is maneuverable, but that's more about realigning its orbit to align with a new landing site or to align with an incoming vehicle from Earth, whether it be Orion or Starship or whatever. But I don't think orbit maintenance is a huge consideration when you're orbiting the moon.
Also, I have a bad take about Gateway.
Oh, here we go.
Well, I think the older name was better.
What was the older name?
Lopchi.
Oh, well, okay, Gateway was the original name, and then they changed it to Lab G, and then they changed it back to Gateway.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but I think Lopchi was the better name.
Lunar Outpost Gateway, is that what the
Lunar
acronym stood
Orbital
for?
Platform Gateway.
Oh. Or
I think
Gateway
that was
for
a cool
sure.
name.
I don't know, I feel like that's still
Lopchi.
just Gateway with extra steps.
Yeah, but I really like the flow of Lopchi.
Sorry, you also think the Saturn V is ugly, so...
Yeah, I'm gonna
Wait,
disagree
why?
with you, Adrian.
Last
No.
time you mentioned that on stream, I got like 7 mentions instantly on Twitter of people being very angry with me. So I just want to point out I don't like the visuals. I didn't trash talk the rocket itself. I only have a different taste in visuals. Please
Well, you're
don't
still
be
wrong.
angry with me on Twitter.
Another question. Will each lunar landing require a new or separate lunar starship?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think we have had an answer from SpaceX on that matter. Or any.
I mean, the design
matter
architecture certainly
ridiculous.
lends itself to reusability, as long as
Yeah.
you can refuel the lunar starship.
I do believe, I think they said that, not the SpaceX, but I think NASA hinted that the one that is going to be used for the uncrewed demo is the one that they're going to use for the crewed demo or something like that. It was
Okay.
weird the way that they mention it, and I'm not sure about it, but yeah, I think we need more information by SpaceX and NASA. The problem is when you go and ask NASA some of these questions, they defer to SpaceX, and then SpaceX is not available for comment. And so, that's sort of the thing here, that there's some questions about it, and we are not getting answers. And I'm sometimes very critical about this because it's a huge deal. It's like the next lunar lander, right? We're celebrating this week the 53rd anniversary of Apollo 11. And we're gonna be having the 50th anniversary this December of Apollo 17, which was the last time any human landed on the moon. So, I mean, having the next lander be here and tested and being developed and not having a straight answer about some of these basic questions, it bothers me a little bit, to be honest. But that's my personal opinion, obviously.
Yeah, in my head, I always hope that they start to really PR this up a bit and give more information on how the profile works and everything once Starship basically completes its orbital test flight. That they basically waiting for that success and then they're moving the focus to HLS and give us more on that. I really hope that, because I would love to have more information about the specs and the exact flow of the mission, how they will perform it. Yeah, I hope that basically on the SLS side, Artemis 1, and on the Starship side, the orbital test flight are the two bottlenecks to more information, and after that they will really focus on that. That is my hope.
Yeah, and so first of all, we had a super chat that just says Saturn V is stunning and Gateway is better. Sorry, Adrian.
I think
But,
at this point, I noticed that my opinions might not be majority able here in the chat. Yeah, I noticed that there's some antagonistic feelings here.
But Chad also mentioning, so low lunar orbits are often unstable due to basically orbital perturbations, and that could eventually cause orbits to decay. However, the Gateway is not in a low lunar orbit. It is in a near rectilinear halo orbit, which is this really eccentric and pretty high altitude orbit. At the lowest point, I don't remember how low it does get at the lower point of the orbit, but I think it would be less susceptible to that. It's still not zero. I understand that some orbital maintenance may be required for that, but it is different than, say, like natural orbital decay from atmospheric drag or something like that. But it is worth mentioning that. That's a good point, Chad. And then, Fall Perspective is saying Orion cannot refuel HLS. So HLS would not be refueled by Orion. HLS would return to low Earth orbit and get refueled by Starship tankers. That's the concept of operations there. The same way it would before it even goes to the moon in the first place. I don't know if it would be worth it to like fly a tanker to lunar orbit and refuel it there, or if it makes more sense to return the tanker or return HLS to low Earth orbit, refuel there, and then go back to the moon. What do you think?
In my head, it would be flying a tanker too, because you would be able to basically fill up a tanker on Leo,
right,
and send it to the near rectilinear halo orbit, and that sounds more efficient to me.
It might be similar either way.
And also, you reduce the stress you put on the hardware that actually is needed to get people on the moon. So, in this kind of scenario, HLS has to move the least, which might be desirable. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure what they would choose, but I hope they just use that kind of strategy to refill it, because that would make this more scalable. You would be able to fly more with the HLS.
Yeah, and also, speaking of refuelings, I was thinking Gateway is also supposed to be refueled in some shape or form, with a Sprit module, I think it is. It's gonna have like the R in Sprit. It's actually referring to refueling, in some shape or form, and that's actually planned to be refueled. But I have no idea how it's gonna be refueled. Like, is it gonna be something more like Northrop Grumman's MEV platform? That's also interesting to see what happens, or if there's any sort of need for a refueling. Because if I remember correctly, they were thinking of the current as of current design of the Gateway and the launch fuel that it'll have and everything. Like, it will last 15 years in the near rectilinear halo orbit. So it's like that's a long time for such a small station, considering all the plans that are coming later down the line for NASA and the spaceflight program in general, Mars, right? So yeah, it's, I don't know. It has the capability, but we'll see if it actually happens.
I also want to nominate near rectilinear halo orbit for the orbit with the best name ever. I think compared to the classic orbits like low Earth orbit or sun synchronous orbit, near rectilinear halo orbit basically, yeah, knocks it out of the park. It's winning. It's the best named orbit out there, and that's my opinion here.
It is a pretty cool name, not gonna lie. Halo orbit, even on its own, sounds kind of cool.
Yes.
And of course, so for those who do not know, a halo orbit, the reason it's called that is because if you look at the orbit from Earth looking towards the moon, it looks like a halo around the moon. You can see the entirety of the orbit from Earth, and the reason you do that is so that the Lunar Gateway Station will always be able to communicate with the Earth, because it's never going to go on the far side of the moon away from Earth, basically. And then it can act as a good communications relay to the surface. That's why they are choosing that orbit. Also, I just want to point out the engine chill vents are going again. We're still waiting on either a depress or activity to pick up for actual, more testing here. But ship 24 has not been fully depressurized yet, so not in the stance where they're done yet, but also not looking like they're about to test again. So we're still kind of waiting in the middle there.
Yeah, it looks like these engine vents are kind of fizzling out a bit. Like we saw that before with depressuring vents. They don't have like the force they had before when they were open. This is more like fading out a bit. So at least for me, it looks like the pressure inside these tanks is lower at this point, and this is more like the getting the rest out.
Alright, we got more questions though. Elon said in an interview that they want to create a even higher pressure with Raptor 2. Is that something they can test with a spin prime, or do they have to turn on the engines for that? That's not really something I think you can test with only a spin prime. I think you need to actually fire the engines to get at, because they're talking about the pressure in the combustion chamber, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that's something that you will want to test for the first time here at Starbase.
Right, yeah, you would first of all, you would test that in McGregor, that's for sure.
Which we have McGregor livestream, by the way.
Yeah, in case you haven't noticed, NASASpaceflight has a 24/7 live feed from McGregor where SpaceX does all of their engine testing. So please check that out if you haven't. It's the newest 24/7 stream actually. But yeah, so first of all, they wouldn't test it on a Starship vehicle, but also a spin prime does not reach the maximum pressure in the combustion chamber. So there you go.
I don't even think that they reach any pressure at all, because it's just a spin in the pumps, right? So, yeah, and you're not creating any combustion. So yeah, like you will see small increase just from the pressure of the flow into the combustion chamber, but it's not the flow that you will expect from like a huge combustion happening on the pre-burners and all that. Like, yeah, it's not the same conditions, like not even by a bit.
Yeah, and in general, just general statement here, we don't expect them to go all out on engine performance on engines that are installed on vehicles, I guess.
Right, exactly.
They're not even firing these engines for the first time on these vehicles. They are always pre-fired in McGregor usually, and they won't go like to the end of the limits of the engine while it's installed on a vehicle. They would do that on a single engine in McGregor on a test stand, because there you don't damage millions of dollars of other hardware if you blow it up.
Exactly. Daniel asking, how's the fuel of the ISS cooled? I believe the ISS uses all storable propellants, like the thrusters, right? It's like hypergolics. Maybe.
I have no idea, and I don't dare to comment here.
I'm googling it. International Space Station
cooled, right?
thrusters. What?
It is not cooled.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I think it's a storable, like hypergol propellant of some kind, like hydrazine or something.
The range of the questions asked today is really high, by the way. We are going all across the aisle of what you can ask about rockets and engines and all the kinds of rockets and regions. So it's you're challenged today, chat. I like it.
I just found a paper from 1987 with the NASA worm logo on it.
Oh, that's
And
a
it's
good
like
one because it has the
badly
worm.
photocopied. I'm pretty sure that all of the maneuvering that the ISIS does is with storable propellants. I don't think there's any cryogenics on board.
It would make
or even
sense,
any
maybe.
like normal liquid propellants. So to answer the question, the propellants that are stable at the temperatures that they're stored at, and they're not going to boil off or anything, so they don't actually have to need to cool the fuel. I wanted to confirm that. I couldn't really find a confirmation in my quick Googly searching, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Let's see. Do we know if there are any plans for maintenance of the lunar landers, such as engine repair or replacement?
On the lunar...
That's
I
also
So like of HLS, basically.
I would doubt that they can replace like an engine in orbit. That's
But how cool would that be, though?
Yeah, it would be very cool. But could you see that? Like really them bringing up a full Raptor engine and astronauts installing it? I would be very surprised to see that. It would be very cool, and it would, I think, demonstrate amazing capabilities of humanity in orbit. But I mean, that's a big engine. And probably a complicated process the astronauts are not schooled, not teach to do.
Well, we do know, I mean, eventually, like later on Mars missions, you would want the ability to like swap out engines and stuff like eventually you'll want that capability, and I think part of the Raptor 2 development process was also designing it so that it's easy to swap engines and do things like that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts. I don't think there are plans for that in the very near future, but I mean, here's the question, like at some point there's got to be some sort of limit as to how many reignitions Raptor can do. So how many landings could an HLS do before the Raptors reach their limit of reignitions, you know what I mean?
But didn't like SpaceX clarify at some point that they want to be able to land Raptor like 100 times or so?
Well, but it could also just be a ridiculous number of ignitions. So
yeah, like I would really like if we reached the design capabilities of Raptor in lunar missions, because that would mean we had a lot of lunar missions, which would be amazing.
That's fair. All right, thank you for the question there.
Yeah, great question.
Wait, what was this? You said you gave you said about the gateway name. Desmo says, okay, that I agree with. So you've got one opinion of yours, Adrian, that Chad agrees with.
Well, it actually is two, because I also said the worm is cooler than the meatball, and Chad evidently agrees with that. We had a poll.
The worm isn't a logo. The worm is a type font, and the meatball is an actual logo, and I will stand by that opinion.
Yeah, and Chad disagrees with
It's
you.
not that the worm is bad, it's just not a logo.
I mean, is it, though? I think it was used as a logo.
Anyway, moving on. Helder with a super chat, thank you so much. Oh, here's a good question. Samuel Haas, do you expect to ever see an expander cycle Methalox engine flying on any vehicle? Am I crazy, or is that a thing? Some company has announced one.
an expander cycle Methalox engine. Oh yeah, I think it was the M10 engine on the Vega E rocket. It's a Methalox expander cycle. I think it is expander cycle. Hold on, give me less than a minute.
Okay, Alex is gonna Google it.
Can somebody explain to me quick what again was? I'm getting my language confused here. What was expander cycle again?
Okay, so Thomas, you explain him the engine cycle, and I'll find the information.
Okay. Oh god, we're about to do a deep dive into different engine propellant cycles. So there's, oh my god, this isn't my specialty. Why did you tell me? I could Google whether the Vega E has it. Why don't you explain it?
Come on.
I mean, I know. So examples of expander cycle. The RL-10 I know is one. I think the other upper stage engine for Arianespace, Vinci or whatever it is. That's another one.
Oh.
Also, really quick,
Yeah.
B7.1 has stopped venting.
That's in that term big because these test tanks tend to stop venting when they are getting pressured. because basically what they do is they close the vents, and then inside the liquid starts to boil, and that means the pressure rises in the test tank, so they might be getting ready to crush here. We don't know for sure, but usually what we have witnessed previously with this test tank is that stopping of venting means they pressurize it now.
Alright, so Alex, it looks like you have an answer for us.
Yes, it's actually expander cycle.
Right,
There
so
you go.
which engine is that specific? I know it's on Vega E,
It
which
is-
is the variant
is
after
the
Vega C.
M10. It is the M10, and it's actually funny that it's called M10 because then there's the RL10, which is Hydrolux expander cycle. So it seems like it's the 10, always.
Yeah, so the upshot of expander cycle, right, is when you preheat the fuel, like you either run it around, like you use it for cooling, but that increases the fuel, and then that goes through the pumps again, right? Do I have that right?
Yep, that's the one. Oh, look at that. Bunch of eyes coming off 7.1.
Yeah, this looks like it's. This looks
Imagine
like
they
it's
test it
getting,
to failure right now.
Yeah, it could be right. This looks like it's pressurizing.
Well, I will
Anyway,
be more action.
Samuel, I hope we answered your question there. We're gonna have to do a deep dive into every single engine cycle that exists because there's way too many.
I
But that's a
think I
later
know
thing.
someone that did that already.
Oh, that's true. Our good friend Tim Dodd did something like that,
Yeah,
didn't
there you go. Yeah,
Maybe we should just
Team
link
Dot
that.
did it.
But yeah, folks, so if you're just joining us or just want a status update, Ship 24 has not fully been detanked, we don't think yet, or depressurized. But now we're looking at B7.1, which it looks like they have just stopped venting. So it could be pressurizing that tank for a test right now. Also hear some venting from somewhere, but it's not
Yeah.
from the ship and it's not from 7.1. Could be from the tank farm or something.
That I associate that sound with a spooling up tank farm. I cannot say that I can say, okay, that is 100% that, but I noticed that sound earlier when they basically started testing. So, yeah, interesting sound there. Not yet sure what it means, but that is not a sound we usually hear during depress. This is a sound of a spooling up tank farm usually.
Interesting. Now chat's just telling me that I'm wrong about the worm logo.
Yeah, because this is how it feels, Thomas.
Okay, but, well, never mind, I'm not gonna go there.
You can only lose this, trust me.
Yeah, I know, there's no winning. Question, will there be an ESA astronaut on early Artemis missions? I don't know if they've officially announced that yet, but I'd be shocked if not.
Yeah.
The only one I know,
ESA.
Artemis 2, is it Artemis 2 or Artemis 3 that has a Canadian astronaut on it? I think it's Artemis 2.
Yeah,
Oh, now I
I'm
gotta
looking-
Google it. I keep having to Google
I'm-
things because I keep second guessing myself.
I think you're right. I think it was 2.
Yes,
I'm
okay,
pretty
Artemis
sure
2 will have a Canadian on board. And then Artemis 3, nothing yet, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think
feel
they
like there
have
was also,
gone into
like-
any specific. Oh, we have vents again from B7.1, so seems like
A
something
little
open
bit,
again.
yeah. But yeah, I know Artemis 2 will have a Canadian astronaut on board. I also know that I think part of that deal was also on a future landing mission, but not like the first one. There'll be a Canadian astronaut, and I'm assuming that'll be an ongoing partnership, but I know that's planned, and I would be shocked. Obviously, the USA is involved. They are providing a module for Gateway. They build the service module for the Orion spacecraft, so they're already involved with the program, but I would be shocked if there is not a European astronaut on some early flights.
Yeah, I mean,
Same thing with Japanese astronauts, by the way.
with the service module alone, I feel like it's a given. Like, I
Yeah.
don't see ESA being like fine to not bring an astronaut there if they provide parts of the module that brings it there.
like it would make a lot of sense to fly a European astronaut on the launch that launches the Esperate module, for example. Just like it would make sense to have a JAXA astronaut for the IHAB module, the Japanese module. That would make a lot of sense. And then if you're going to do any work like helping to install that module or anything and you need a crew member out there doing that, also obviously the lunar surface missions, all opportunities to bring your international partners with. Alright, let me see some more questions here. Aha! Alright, well, we wanted an answer whether they were done or not. And that, to me, looks like a depressurization event. It looks like Starship 24 has finally finished testing for, at least for now. I guess they could spool up later. But we'll come back later if there's going to be more testing. But folks, that right there is a sign of a completed day of testing for Ship 24. We saw 2 different spin prime tests, about a little less than half an hour apart from one another. And that's more Ship 24 testing in the books. B7.1 is still being tested back there. But given how long test tanks can go, I think we'll leave that to Starbase Live as Ship 24 does some more venting. Thank you, Ship 24. Really quick, let's speed run these last couple super chats here. Jared says, any thoughts on B7.1? I know it's being overshadowed by Ship 24, and rightly so, but it's braving the cold as well. Yeah, it's cool to keep tabs on the B7.1 tank, and sometimes when they test those tanks to failure, it's really spectacular, but otherwise, it's just a tank that gets cold, and sometimes it can be very boring to watch, which is why we don't usually have commentary on those kind of things. But, of course, you can always follow all of the testing live on Starbase Live 24/7, so we are still covering it even if we're not talking about it all the time. But yeah, so thank you for the support there. Brendan, do you think SpaceX will use the Starship for their first catch attempt? They have more experience landing Starship than the booster. Oh, could they try to catch a Starship before they try and catch a booster?
I would doubt that. I would so far what we heard is they are basically doing they're doing booster first so far, and wait, I'm looking at something here.
I mean, I think I agree. We know that's been the plan for now, and we don't know. I mean, they have to get Starship to survive reentry first, too. I think that's a higher priority than catching it. Maybe that's a worthy point to make there.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking here. It seems like they are pulling B7 now with the can crusher.
I was gonna say, is that what you're looking at? So,
yes.
First of all, to answer the question, maybe we haven't heard much about that. But the latest plans we heard was that booster first. But yes, let's talk about B7.1. It looks like they are putting the tank under some mechanical pressure right now.
Yeah, it looks like they're pulling these straps you can see on the outside. It looks like they're pulling them. So basically, they are increasing the stress the tank has to experience while being filled. So it looks like they're in this simulation mode right now, and yeah, we'll see if there's a limit for this or if they wanna go all out with the test.
And there you go. This is a great super chat to end on. I have a great shirt from Adam Savage with Savage printed in the type font which NASA chose for printing their acronym. The meatball is a great logo. Thank you.
Oh, you found a supporter that encouraged you.
Chat seems split pretty evenly. Let me check on this poll that we started. There is a poll for the best NASA logo, and really quick, it looks like
it's not
I can't see the results anymore.
It's 56% warm, 20% meatball.
I'm not ignoring the poll, Chris. I saw the poll.
I'm gonna ask Chris.
And
where's the option for none?
And 21% for worm ball. So your meatball is almost beaten by the mix logo of the worm ball. Just saying, you're almost losing against worm ball.
I'm disappointed in chat. Chat, you have disappointed me. The meatball is better. That's all I have to say on that. Folks, I think that's going to do it for our live coverage of Ship 24 testing. If you want to stay tuned with the happenings in Starbase, including B7.1, which who knows how long that testing is going to be, as it starts to vent a little bit more there too. Definitely go check out Starbase Live. We'll be watching all of the Starbase happenings over there. But Ship 24, with 2 more spin prime tests done, our commentators are going to sign off really quick around the horn. Adrian Bile, thank you for hopping on today.
I am, so glad I could help in the end, and I'm looking forward to whatever happens in this crazy day today.
Yeah, it has been a busy day indeed. Adrian, thank you so much. Alex, also for hopping on some commentary. Thank you so much for all of your help today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a long day today.
Sure has. They're going to get a break after this finally. And also, of course, Michael Baylor in the background operating today's stream. Thank you so much to Michael for running the Starbase stream today. And then my name is Thomas Burkhart, News Director for NASASpaceflight. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for all of the support, for Super Chats, memberships, just tuning in and dropping some messages in chat. All of those things, we really appreciate it. And we'll catch you all on our next live stream. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
Our CPA pressure looks good. Toggling up. Roger roll, Atlantis.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight outside SC off. Bring in SC off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.